The dawn over Dragonstone was the color of steel. Flat, muted, promising nothing. A stiff wind rolled in from the narrow sea, carrying the tang of salt and a hint of distant storms. Beneath the crumbling ramparts, Jon Snow stood on a jutting parapet dressed in the black leathers of the Night's Watch that he could not yet bring himself to discard. Ghost lay at his side, tail twitching. From this height, Jon watched Daenerys Targaryen stride the morning battlements with her counselors. Ser Jorah walked half a step behind her. Missandei hovered near, parchment in hand. Tyrion trailed with a soldier's stoop, despite no armor on his back. They spoke in low voices Jon could not hear, but he felt the hum of destiny in their gathering. The slow whirl of two distant storms now converged. Long after the others drifted back inside, Daenerys lingered. She crossed to Jon, her silver-white hair stirring in the wind, violet eyes bright. For a breath they only watched the horizon where the sea fused with sky. Then she spoke, voice iron beneath silk. Winterfell's banners rally, but not enough to face Ramsay Bolton. She said Bolton's name is, one might say, pox. You need men, I need the North. Unity, Lord Snow. Jon folded gloved hands upon the parapet. Unity bought with vows. He met her gaze, found neither scorn nor avarice, only steady purpose. He had searched half a lifetime for such purpose. A marriage, he said. She inclined her head, as though they merely bartered casks of wine. In name and flesh. Your Northmen trust your honor. My followers trust my blood. Together we might convince the world there is more to fear than ancient feuds. Then Darrow. He almost smiled. Dragons and White Walkers. A fair wedding gift. Her laughter came quick, startling them both. Its warmth broke the chill wind, but in its wake settled a hush far deeper. Do you fear me? She asked. Soft, intimate. I fear what you represent, Jon answered after a pause. Fire reborn. If burned wrong, the North becomes ash. And I fear your winter, she whispered. If frozen wrong, my dragons die before they learn true flight. Their hands brushed atop cold stone. Something passed. Silent accord. Maybe something more. News rippled faster than ravens fly. A Stark and a Targaryen to wed. The old wolves and old dragons, the blood of ice and fire. Some maesters whispered of prophecy's balance, others of blasphemy. Yet soldiers at Moat Cailin sharpened swords with brighter eyes, and fishermen off White Harbor sang that two fallen houses would rise together. When the letter reached Winterfell, Sansa traced the Targaryen seal. Three-headed dragon wax on black, her fingers trembling with memory of torches across the Godswood. The night Ramsay took her childhood home, but hope, sharp as newly unscabbarded steel, flickered to life. Across the narrow sea, the marriage stirred different hearts. Grey Worm marshaled the Unsullied into tighter phalanxes. Any voyage that carried his queen so far north must pass waters prowled by Euron Greyjoy. Dothraki riders grumbled over crossing the poison water. Yet Dario's tales of snow demons and castles carved from ice kindled feverish curiosity. Tyrion Lannister wandered the courtyard each evening, wine cup neglected, rehearsing treaties to soothe offended Westerosi lords. Sir Davos Seaworth took quill to parchment beside Jon in the modest solar of Dragonstone's South Tower. The former smuggler weighed each word like coin. To the noble houses of the North, he muttered. Offer truth, not poetry. Dragons live, seen by my own salt-scarred eyes. Winter is no fable. The wall will not stand forever. Jon signed beneath, the ink hardly dry when a booming screech rattled panes. Drogon sweeping low, vast wings blotting half the courtyard. Smoke trailing his maw as if even calm flights required some measure of menace. Davos swallowed. 7, save us, he said, but Jon's eyes tracked the beast with something borderline reverence. That night, the handfasting was sealed before the old Valyrian hearth of Aegon's Hall. Only a circle of chosen witnesses, Davos for Jon, Missandei for Daenerys, Tyrion as officiant in absence of Septon, Ghost and Drogon silent sentinels in shadow. The hall smelled of brimstone and pine resin. Carved dragons coiled upon the pillars as though eavesdropping. Jon pledged sword and life, and the honor of House Stark. Daenerys pledged dragons and justice, and the mercy of House Targaryen. Though mercy sounded strangely fierce when spoken by a woman forged in fire. Tyrion cut a thin line across their palms with a ceremonial dragonglass dagger. As their blood mingled, a gust stirred tower braziers into tall tongues of flame. Some would say later the flames formed a direwolf crowned by wings. Others swore the wind merely played tricks. Yet those present felt the world shift fractionally, as if great gears hidden beneath Westeros clicked into new alignment. No songs marked the union, no feast overladen with courses. Instead, Daenerys led Jon through silent corridors to the hidden rookery, overlooking Blackwater Bay's endless night. There they spoke in murmurs about ghosts. Hers named Viserys and Drogo, his named Ygritte and Robb. Each loss met the others until grief resembled a ledger, finally evened. When words at last failed, they found comfort, the older than kingdoms. Before dawn broke, vows had taken root deeper than parchment could hold. They sailed north aboard the Wind Scythe, a Braavosi caravel flying the direwolf amid crimson dragon wings. Tyrion commanded the fleet of allied vessels behind, scanning skies for white sails of Greyjoy reavers. Ahead flew Drogon, his shadow streaking foam like spilled ink. Viserion and Rhaegal banked lazily in his wake, smaller but no less dreadful, watched by mariners who clutched talismans, even while praising their new queen's might. Jon spent the voyage upon the forecastle deck, reading the waves as once he read the snows beyond the wall. He felt the realm's heartbeat thrumming beneath wood and wind, a great animal unsure whether to trust the stranger astride its back. When Daenerys joined him, she brought a star map charted in Valyrian glyphs. Together they plotted the fleet's course to White Harbor, then over the Barrowlands toward Winterfell. She asked curious questions, of karst rivers under the last hearth, of moonlight on the weirwood faces, and Jon answered until stories painted landscapes more vivid than maps. For each tale he gave, she gifted tales of Qarth's perfumed vaults, or the red wastes beyond Vase to Loro. In the still hours before dawn, Jon taught her the northern tongue for my love, Mlin Dawn. Daenerys repeated it, the word foreign yet pleasant upon her lips. She taught him Balankar. It meant little brother, but in older dialects implied protector bound by fate. Jon practiced until the guttural edges softened into something like belonging. Yet not all on board shared their harmony. The northern bannermen who had sailed south with Jon, Mormonts, Hornwoods, a smattering of free folk, eyed Dothraki riders with open suspicion. Axes rested a heartbeat away from hafts. Dothraki curved arex never far from calloused hands. A fight nearly erupted when Tormund Giantsbane wagered he could drink a leather-skinned warrior under the table, and the Dothraki took insult at the notion of losing in any contest. Jon diffused tempers by reminding both sides of the pale things marching beyond the wall, whose only language was death, yet he sensed such reminders would grow harder once boots pressed northern soil. Daenerys managed her own frictions. Grey Worm found stealthy unsullied patrols lurking near the ship's more raucous holds. When discovered, he inclined his head to Joan's Northmen with crisp courtesy, but remained silent, impassive. Missandei mediated, coaxing smiles with gentle translation, ensuring straps of goat hide traded for bottles of sour Dornish red. Tyrion, watching from stern rail, mused aloud that the greatest test of their alliance might prove not the Bolton bastard, but small, daily grievances of pride. White Harbor welcomed dragons first. Drogon circled the city's high towers, his roar cracking gull cries, sending fishmongers scuttling beneath stalls. Viserion dipped so low his wing nearly clipped the old mint spire. The Manderless, renowned for banners of green mermen, rallied archers to ramparts before Maester Theomond sprinted wheezing to remind them whose beasts filled the sky. When Jon and Daenerys disembarked upon the stone wharf, a hush fell heavy as winter fog. Lord Wyman, vast of girth and voice, bowed deeper than protocol required. He pledged ships, salt beef, and manderly swords for the coming war. In his great hall that night, between platters of whitefish stew, he raised a goblet to His Grace John of Houses Stark and Targaryen, true-born son of ice and fire. and Her Grace Daenerys Stormborn, rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Many present swore to memory the slight twitch of Jon's brow at the word trueborn, though none dared debate lineage with dragons roosting on the distant hillside. It was Sansa who greeted them at Molestown Crossroads, a day's ride from Winterfell. She sat astride a dappled mare, flanked by Brienne of Tarth glittering in new polished steel. Between them fluttered the direwolf banner restored, and below it a hastily stitched dragon of red silk. Sansa's blue-gray eyes assessed Daenerys in a heartbeat, appraising, wary yet not unkind. When Jon dismounted, sister met brother with quiet steadiness. She embraced him, and as the scent of pine clung to his cloak, she allowed relief to seep across guarded features. Then she curtsied to Daenerys, measured but courteous. The queen inclined her head, accepting a trust that would take battles of its own to earn. Ghost bounded ahead when Winterfell's battlements rose through evening mist, ragged teeth of dark stone, torches lining the walls like foxfire. Jon had dreamt of this return, yet never with dragons coiling among the clouds above, nor armies trumpeting across the courtyard. Stable boys froze at the sight of gray-cloaked Unsullied, their spears glinting eerily in cold torchlight. Old Nan, half-blind yet keen of ear, whispered to passing washerwomen that the age of heroes marched again. Inside the great hall, Jon clasped hands with northern lords who had bled for his house, each vow renewed with solemn eyes. He introduced Daenerys, not as conqueror, but as wife. And they listened, because their lord spoke with the iron calm of Ned Stark reborn. Yet murmurs slithered through torch shadows. What did a southern queen know of snowmelt floods or white wolf hunts? Would she burn harvests if the north balked? Jon's marriage ignited hope. Yes, but hope is a fragile flame beside old fears. That same eve, beyond Winterfell's outer gate, Davos and Tormund received emissaries clutching flayed man banners. Ramsay Bolton invited Lord and Lady Targaryen Stark to surrender before blood need spill. The parchment reeked of fresh dog fat, a signature of Dreadfort cruelty. Jon shredded the letter, eyes dark as storm-soaked ravens. Daenerys ordered it burned. The scent of charred parchment drifted like omen through the castle. The War Council convened under Winterfell's tallest tower, walls hung with wolf pelts and dragon sigils side by side. Maps spanned wooden tables. Chalk lines for cavalry charges, carved figurines for dragons perched near enemy siege engines. Tyrion moved Bolton pieces like a man rehearsing dread. He advised striking when weather turned sleet, hindering Bolton cavalry. Jorah counseled swift, overwhelming assault led by dragonfire. Strike terror quick, scatter the bastards. Sansa proposed luring Ramsay out with feints at ruined watchtowers he prized for hunting parties. Each plan collided, fused, reshaped. Jon listened. He weighed ghostly memories, battle lines on the Frostfangs, Mance Rayder's doomed charge, and gleaned one truth: numbers alone would not win. Ramsay knew the terrain. His men fought with savage delight. But they had dragons, and that tempered every arithmetic of war. Daenerys suggested using air to break the shield wall, but she refused to roast the North's own fields. Jon agreed. If they torched the earth, they meant to rule. Winter famine would finish what Bolton's swords began. Instead, Drogon would target siege towers and supply wagons. Viserion and Rhaegal would flank the cavalry with passes of flame calibrated. Tyrion hoped to frighten more than incinerate. Grey Worm assigned Unsullied spear blocks to guard Stark infantry flanks. Free folk archers would harry from treeline, guided by arrows treated in wildfire. An ominous gift smuggled north by Davos from hidden caches Stannis never spent. As snow began to fall in earnest, so did letters from distant banners. The Glovers at Deepwood Moat, the Karstarks at Last Hearth. Some pledged neutrality, others outright refusals. Yet House Mormont rode under a girl no taller than a spear, Lady Lyanna, her 62 men proud as legends. She greeted Daenerys with fearless candor. If dragons be real, then monsters north of the wall are real too. We'll fight them after we flay the other monster wearing a man's skin. Daenerys smiled, the first genuine smile since setting sail. an alliance sealed by shared abhorrence of cruelty. On the eve of battle, Jon sought solitude in the godswood. The heart tree's red eyes leaked resin tears into snowy hollows. He knelt, felt the careful crunch of frost beneath knee, and whispered prayers half-remembered. For Ned, for Ygritte, for the men he would command at dawn. The weirwood listened in crimson silence. When Daenerys entered, soft cloak trailing over roots, Jon rose startled. "I did not mean to disturb," she murmured. Her breath puffed white. "You are no disturbance." He stepped aside for her to face the tree. She regarded it with curious wonder. "I was born on Dragonstone," she said slowly, "where the gods are molten stone and sea. This red face feels older." She touched bark stained like wounds. "It saw the first men come," Jon said. "Perhaps it sees us too." She turned, snowflakes shimmering in her pale lashes. "If we fall tomorrow, promise me you will burn my body." The words shook with neither fear nor pride, only stark acceptance. Jon's throat tightened. "I promise. But we will not fall." He clasped her hands, felt tremor of cold and courage mingled. Ghost padded from darkness, resting muzzle against Daenerys' thigh with silent approval. Moments later, Rhaegal swept overhead, doleful cry echoing through branches. Two creatures, dire wolf and dragon, met eyes across clearing. Jon thought some deep chord of the old world chimed then, a bargain struck between shapes of myth. Dawn bled pink across the ridge where Bolton banners serried like rusted spears. Ramsay himself rode a black stallion, pale eyes glinting above a grin wolfish as any sigil. He saw Jon and Daenerys astride grey auroch and silver mare, their armies drawn behind. Stark spears, wildling axes, unsullied shields glimmering with hoarfrost. Above, dragons circled, wings shredding clouds to tatters. A hush stretched taut between hosts, broken only by the slow creak of Ramsay's siege towers. The bastard of Bolton raised a hand, perhaps in mock salute, perhaps simple hubris, and released the hounds. They streaked forward, drawn by scent of blood, pre-spattered on morning snow from sacrificed prisoners. Arrows fell from northern bows, mowing first wave, yet through falling bodies rushed more, hunger driving them. Daenerys squeezed Jon's gloved hand once, then spurred her mare toward a ridge where Drogon awaited. She vaulted to his neck with practiced ease. All eyes lifted as black wings unfurled fully. The first gout of flame took the wind, an infernal banner, roasting charging hounds into smoking heaps. Bolton cavalry balked. Horses reared. Ramsay's grin faltered but did not fade. He signaled for archers. Jon drove forward with wildlings forming shattered arrowhead. Dot. Grey Worm's units folded behind. Shields interlocking. The snow churned beneath 1,000 boots. The air cracked with barbed shafts. Across no man's land, stark banners clashed with flayed men under skies, streaked gold by dragon breath. Tyrion's wildfire-tipped arrows ignited Bolton supply wagons. Green plumes roared high, sending soldiers scattering like ants from spilled honey ablaze. Ramsay rallied his corps, northern turncloaks who feared him more than dragons. They advanced behind massive shields, forming a spiked crescent. Jon's line met them with crash-rivaling thunder. He parried a spear, drove Longclaw through chain and clavicle, blood steaming upon Valyrian steel. Tormund grappled 2 men at once, laughter booming savage, while Lady Mormont's diminutive command skewered ankles through shield gaps, felling giants with cunning ferocity. Above, Drogon swooped low. Flame carefully herded to edges of battlefield, where the shield wall threatened to envelop Stark forces. Jon felt searing heat kiss his hair yet burn none of his men. A dance of death choreographed by the Silver Queen balancing terror and mercy. Bolton men broke, first in trickles, then a tide. Some threw down arms, others fled for snow-choked woods only to find free folk arrows in their backs. Ramsay retreated to his cavalry reserve, eyes narrowed, fury smoldering. As he wheeled to rally, a distant roar split sky, Rhaegal and Viserion diving in tandem. Their joined flame carved a trench of molten earth before Ramsay's path, severing commander from army. His horse reared, nearly unseating him. Panic replaced malice in pale eyes. Jon spurred forward with Davos and Mormont's soldiers tight, not to chase but to cut the serpent's head. Ramsay turned, nocked arrow, aimed for direwolf charging beside Jon Danawolf. But Ghost leaped first, white fury erupting, jaws closing around horse's throat. The steed collapsed. Ramsay rolled free, rose with dagger top drawn. Jon dismounted in a fluid sweep, snow puffing. They circled, two bastards bound by Winterfell walls. Ramsay sneered. "You'll never be Stark, but you might make a decent rug." Jon answered with steel. Their blades rang, edge to edge, but Ramsay's smirk faltered as strength behind long claw-hammered wrists numb from cold. A quick feint, step. Ramsay staggered, blood seeping through fur. He scrambled for fallen bow, but a gust of wind and wings rush announced fate. Drogon landing behind Jon, eyes molten. Daenerys slid down, hair whipping about her like flame gone white. She watched this private duel with terrible calm. Jon advanced. Ramsay loosed arrow. Ghost lunged, intercepting shaft mid-flight. A yelp, but survived. Jon's fury unleashed. They say later his sword became a streak, and Ramsay fell kneeling, hand sliced clean off at wrist. He shrieked until Jon's boot crushed his throat to hush. The battle ended not in roaring triumph, but stunned quiet. Snow drifted into blood rivulets. Fires crackled. Moans of wounded echoed. Yet banners of flayed men lay trampled in red mud, direwolf and dragon rising above. In Winterfell's hall that eve, surviving lords gathered under stone rafters still scarred by Bolton torches. Jon and Daenerys entered side by side. Their cloaks were caked with mud and ash, not silk, and their crowns were none. Only circlets hastily forged by blacksmiths from broken spear tips and melted crossbow bolts. Yet when they spoke, every voice stilled. Sansa announced bread and salt for all, symbol of guest right restored. Jon declared Ramsay's line extinguished, the Dreadfort sent to dust, flaying outlawed under pain of dragonfire. Daenerys promised grain from the Reach, and gold seized from slavers of Meereen for widows and orphans of the north. Murmurs turned to cheers. Some knelt, others raised cups. Yet amid joy, both bride and groom wore gravity. For beyond this night of reclaimed home loomed the wall, and beyond the wall, an army of the dead. Later, in chambers once belonging to Ned Stark, Jon sat before a hearth newly lit. Daenerys knelt beside him, easing Ghost's bandaged flank. The direwolf nuzzled her palm, rumbling content despite wound. Jon watched flames flicker against her hair, felt weight of future press upon shoulders. "This was but one battle," he said. "I know." She leaned into his side. "Yet today we proved unity can win. Tomorrow we prove hope can live." He kissed her brow. Outside snow fell silent, cloaking fields where dragons slumbered. Above, the night sky stretched black and endless. But for the first time in a generation, twin fires burned in Winterfell. One silver, one dire gray mingling sparks that rose as if to challenge stars themselves. And far to the north, atop the wall's frozen crest, pale blue eyes opened in ancient skulls, sensing the new blaze on southern winds, and hungered. The raven bearing word of victory flew through blizzards to Castle Black, where Melisandre watched horizon in quiet dread. When the bird landed upon her wrist, she read the parchment, eyes alight not with triumph, but wary calculation. "Prince that was promised," she murmured, voice trembling. Yet, even as she spoke, flames in her brazier cracked, revealing shapes she did not dare describe. 3 heads, 1 heart, swirling amidst storms of snow and ash. Back in Winterfell, Daenerys stood on rampart at dawn, cloak whipping. Jon joined, and together they watched unsullied drill beside Stark spearmen, wildling youths learning pike from Grey Worm. Drogon perched atop the broken tower, wings outstretched to gathering light. Spring feels far. Jon said. Yet each winter ends. She replied. He looked to her, found resolve mirrored. Their joined hands rested on stone rough as the path ahead. The war for the dawn had yet to begin, but the first answer to darkness had been spoken. In vows, in blood, in a fire licked clean by snow. Wind howled through merlons like distant wolves singing to dragons, and though no horns sounded, every soul in Winterfell felt the call. Onward, onward. Where night waited to be broken. Approximately 33,000 characters. The watchman atop Winterfell's eastern wall saw the first flecks of dawn as dim sparks smothered by rising snow, and in their half-sleep, it felt to them like ash drifting from distant pyres. Jon Snow woke long before they did. The hearth in Ned Stark's old solar had died to embers, but Daenerys' warmth lingered beside him. Her silver-white hair fanned across fur blankets like spilled moonlight. He took one quiet moment to listen for the pulse of the castle. Bootsteps of unsullied patrols in the corridors below. The thud of practice spears in the yard. The muted rumble that was ghosts breathing at the foot of the bed. A world alive. Then he rose, fastened black wool over his shoulders, and stepped into the chill corridor where candles guttered in iron sconces. He found Tyrion in the library, nose buried in parchment maps of the gift. Ink stains mottled the hand's fingers. Half the tower's supply had been spent redrawing wildling settlements and abandoned holdfasts south of the wall. Our queen, Tyrion said without looking up, has decided she will accompany you all the way to Castle Black. I argued she should remain here to receive northern lords. She threatened to chain me to a wyvern and see if I still preferred courts to battlefields. Jon smiled despite the hour. She will not be left behind while her dragons fly. Quite. Tyrion rolled up the chart. Which means I must persuade Lord Wyman to stay and greet the Glovers and Karstarks in her stead. Karstarks worship your Stark blood, not hers. And the Glovers? Well, they worship no one but timber and salt beef, so gold should suffice. He rubbed tired eyes. I hope Davos packed barrels of it. Ramsay's vaults yielded near nothing, Jon reminded. But the slaver's treasure from Meereen arrived last night. He thought of the iron-bound chests hauled into Winterfell's crypt-like vaults under unsullied guard. Reeking of foreign spice, gleaming with coins struck with harpy sigils. Gold can mend thin loyalties. His voice hardened. It will not mend the wall. Tyrion straightened. Suddenly solemn. No, but a broken wall mends nothing at all. He hesitated, then extended a small leather case. Dragon glass arrowheads, fresh from the forge. A wedding gift, from the hand to the king in the north. If that title still pleases you. Jon accepted, feeling the weight of each shard press into his palm like slivers of midnight. Thank you, my friend. Let us hope the Night's King does not return the favor. Outside, the courtyard swarmed with preparations, wildling bowyers checking sinew bindings. Mormont spearmen fitting new shields painted with crude dragons alongside the bear. Dothraki riders rolling spare araks in oiled hides for the frozen ride. Grey Worm drilled unsullied into four-man shield walls, his commands clipped, frost puffing around each syllable. At the sight of Jon, he saluted with spear upon shield. The echo ricocheted through stone corridors. Confidence forged in Essos heat, now tempered for winter. Beyond the bustle perched Drogon atop the old broken tower, wings furled but restless, yellow eyes tracking the yard. Rhaegal and Viserion basked in a cleared corner of the Godswood, melting a basin of snow to steaming mud. Bran Stark, pale and distant, sat nearby in his wicker chair, the weirwood roots behind him twisting like petrified veins. Jon crossed to him, boots crunching over frozen puddles. Brother. Jon knelt. Bran's expression seemed carved from marble, but the faintest spark lit behind misted blue eyes. Jon. His voice carried an uncanny weight, as though filled with other echoes. The wall is singing, cracks spider across its song. Jon's breath misted. You've seen it. Fragments, Bran said. A horn of far-off ice, blowing once, twice, thrice. Old spells unravel. The dead gather at Hardhome again. Only this time there is no sea to bar them. The bay is frozen solid. A cord of dread twined through Jon's chest. How long? I cannot say. Bran's hand trembled on the armrest. Time folds north of the wall, but soon. Jon gripped his shoulder. We ride before midday. In the great hall, Daenerys dined quickly on porridge sweetened with northern honey. Her queenly silks exchanged for crimson leather lined with rabbit fur. Her hair was braided back in 3 thick ropes, interwoven with thin silver chains. Beside her, Sansa scanned a ledger of grain stores, quill darting. Conversation between the sisters-in-law flowed in measured beats. Supplies, lordly audiences. The fosterage of hostage sons for new oaths. When Jon approached, Sansa set the ledger down. "We'll manage Winterfell," she said. "Lady Lyanna will keep the Glovers polite." A ghost of a smile. "Or terrified. She has a talent," Jon agreed. Sansa's gaze flickered to Daenerys. "The North is raw from Bolton cruelty. Some will bristle at your dragons." She addressed the queen, but her eyes held wary frankness. "Feed them. Shelter them. They will follow any who keeps their children alive." Daenerys nodded. "I shall leave half my treasury here. And my longest-held friend." She gestured to Missandei, who dipped her head. "She will ease tongues." Tyrion entered just then, silver hand-pin gleaming, to announce the first column was forming at the east gate. Jon reached for Daenerys' gloved hand. Together they strode through echoing corridors where banners of direwolf and dragon hung in equal procession. Outside, snowflakes as fine as ash danced on the wind. Jon swung into the saddle of a shaggy gray courser, loincloth sheathed across his back. Daenerys mounted a lithe, pale mare. Drogon, sensing her movement, spread colossal wings, black membrane rippling like storm clouds. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, ascending with thunderous gusts that rattled every window pane. 1,000 pairs of eyes tracked the dragons until they vanished into swirling sky. The column snaked northward, Stark infantry at the vanguard, followed by free folk sleds laden with obsidian spearheads, umber ox carts of timber for palisades, unsullied cohorts marching 6 abreast, Dothraki outriders scouting the flanks. Davos rode near Jon, counting wagons, muttering of salted cod stalks dwindling. The wind bit like a lash, and each mile they advanced the world grew quieter, the snow deeper, the horizon flatter, an endless white plain broken only by dead pines grayed with hoarfrost. At Molestown, the ragged remnants of the settlement emerged to gape at dragons circling overhead. Children waved sticks. Old miners tipped ragged hoods. Daenerys dismounted, knelt in slush to speak with a girl whose cheeks were raw from wind. She gave the child a cloak pin wrought in the shape of a dragon's wing, and promised bread would follow on the next supply cart. Jon watched the exchange and knew rumors would spread faster than ravens. The Dragon Queen knelt in the snow for a northern child. Such small mercies could be weightier than armies. They pressed on. The wall appeared 3 days later, abrupt as a cliff birthed from sky, its blue-white face streaked with veins of black seep where ancient ice wept. Dragons circled it in widening rings, lords of a domain older than stone keeps. As Jon's party approached, horns sounded from the ramparts. Low, urgent. 2 blasts. Wildlings Dachi. But Castle Black belonged to neither Night's Watch nor Wildling alone now. It belonged to the living, unified. Edison Tollett met them in the courtyard, his black cloak fraying but his sarcasm unweathered. "King Jon returns with heat," he said, glaring up at Drogon, who landed atop the ruined King's Tower and bellowed a gust of smoke that sent crows scattering. Could have used that in the last blizzard. Jon embraced his friend. "Anything from beyond?" Ed's face darkened. Patrol rode west to the Shadow Tower. Never returned. Ravens sent to Eastwatch lost. Something walks the Frostfang passes, slaying elk and leaving trails of frozen blood. And the old storage tunnels under the wall? We hear whispers at night, like brittle leaves skittering, only there's no wind underground. "Men?" Daenerys stepped forward, the courtyard hush turning reverent at her presence. Ed dipped a stiff bow. "Lord Commander." she greeted, acknowledging his absent title with respect. "You have arrows tipped with dragonglass? And barrels of it from your husband." Ed hoisted one black arrow. "We're fletching as fast as we can, but feathers freeze, glue won't set. Need heat." "Menaos." Daenerys laid a palm on Drogon's scale-armored foreleg. "You shall have dragon's fire." She turned to Jon. "Tonight we fly north of the wall. I must see with my own eyes." Jon studied the ice cliffs, felt old dread rise. "I will fly with you." He looked to Rhaegal, smaller than Drogon but fierce. The dragon sensed his gaze, emerald eyes reflecting firelight. That night, a council of the wall convened in the old mess hall, its long tables scarred by generations of recruits. Around the flickering hearth sat an unlikely fellowship. Jon and Daenerys, Tyrion and Davos, Grey Worm and Tormund, Ed and Mira Reed seated beside Bran, silent as snowfall. Gendry polished a war hammer by torch glow, volunteered from Winterfell's smithies for the hammer's long reach against whites. The talk lasted hours. Routes, signals, fallback garrisons. But always the undercurrent: if the wall fell, no holdfast south would stand without dragons at every rooftop. "I've forged chains tipped with hooks," Gendry offered. "Dragons could haul blocks of ice, collapse sections to create trenches." Tyrion sipped watered wine. "Assuming the wall obeys mortal engineering. It was raised by magic older than any Valyrian bricklayer." Bran's voice cut through. "It obeyed hope, and hope is mortal enough." He lifted pale eyes. "But know this: the Night King rides a creature not living nor dead. Fire alone may not slay it." Silence. Daenerys's brow furrowed. "Then ice must meet ice with a hotter flame." Balerian's fire melted Harrenhal's towers. Drogon's could melt this wall if unchecked. "I cannot risk destroying the very shield we defend." "Benawind." Jon laid a hand over hers. "We find the Night King first. Cut the serpent at its skull." Tormund grinned, rubbing his beard. "Aye. And if the skull's too thick, we crack it with this." He hefted a stolen giant's war club, repurposed with plates of dragonglass. The table shook. They agreed on a plan: a small flying vanguard. Jon on Rhaegal, Daenerys on Drogon, Tyrion and Davos, watching with spyglasses from the heights, would scout the haunted forest at first light. Grey Worm would garrison Castle Black with Unsullied. Tormund's free folk would patrol the tunnel mouth. Eddard would signal any movement with green firepots along the parapet. Near dawn, Jon knelt in the yard. Ghost white snow swirling his stable hand struggled to keep torch pits burning for heat. Rhaegal descended in a gale of wing beats, talons sinking into icy mud. Jon climbed the scaled shoulder, gripping leather harness loops forged by Corthian artisans. Rhaegal's hide radiated warmth like a forge. Steam rose where stray flakes touched. Daenerys, mounted on Drogon, guided her dragon to hover beside. Their eyes met across 20 feet of empty air, and Jon felt an unspoken vow ignite. Live or die, they would not break. They rose above the wall, shadows gliding across moonlit ice. From this height, the world looked carved from ghost glass. Every tree a pale bone, every river a twist of silver veins. Far below, Castle Black's fires dotted the snow like ember constellations. They flew north. For an hour nothing stirred but frigid wind swirling off the frost fangs. Then, like candles flickering to life in an endless hall, blue lights appeared between skeletal pines. Not lights. Eyes. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of azure pinpricks moving with eerie synchronicity. The army of the dead. Closer, Jon saw the whites' ranks stretched beyond sight. Skeletal horsemen, dead giants, rag-clad children dragging rusted blades, and among them, carried on poles fashioned from coffin wood, corpse fires of green flame burned inside iron cages. Seer symbols, perhaps trophies, but the blaze did not warm. It cast nothing but sickly light. At their center rode the Night King upon an undead horned beast, something like a dragon stripped of flesh, wings half-rotted yet still capable of grotesque flight. Its eyes burned brighter than forged coals, and frozen mist curled from its nostrils. Jon's heart lurched. Viserion? No, this creature's bones were jagged. Its skull elongated. Some other monster, a thing dredged from ancient glaciers. Daenerys guided Drogon into a steady descent. Rhaegal followed, though a tremor passed beneath Jon's seat. The Night King lifted a spear wrought from transparent crystal. Wind howled. Jon drew Longclaw, though at this height the act felt futile. Daenerys raised a hand. Drogon inhaled. Chest expanding, throat glowing an angry red. A gout of incandescent flame tore downwards, bathing the front ranks of whites. Firestorm illuminated snowfields like a sunrise of ruin. Dozens blackened, crumbled. But others marched through the inferno unscathed, frost flaring around their limbs to smother embers. The Night King hurled his spear. A shard of blue lightning whistled through dawn dimness. Jon shouted. Rhaegal banked, the spear singing past by mere yards, shattering a distant granite outcrop. Splinters of ice exploded like stars. Daenerys urged Drogon higher, regrouping. Jon signaled, fall back. They had seen enough. Enemy numbers beyond reckoning, magic thriving. They must fortify, not squander their greatest weapons on a reckless charge. But the dead did not let them flee unchallenged. With a screech that froze marrow, the corpse dragon launched skyward, bat wings tearing air with rotten sinew. Jon spurred Rhaegal into a spiral ascent. Sword clutched, though he knew steel alone worthless. Drogon roared and met the abomination head-on, claws raking bone, fangs snapping. Greenish frost erupted where Drogon's talons struck, but his black scales held. Rhaegal darted behind, slashing at desiccated tail, vertebrae. The corpse dragon twisted, snapping jaws dripping with shards of frozen venom. Daenerys shouted Valyrian commands. Drogon blasted flame across the undead's flank. For a heartbeat fire engulfed the monster. But flames flickered, dimmed, quenched by supernatural cold. Jon's mind raced. If fire failed, perhaps impact would not. He urged Rhaegal forward, directing the dragon's massive body into a ramming dive. Scales collided with brittle bone. A crunch like glaciers calving thundered across the sky as ribs snapped, membranous wing ripped. The corpse dragon tumbled, shrieking in agonized ruin, trailing shards of blue ice. Yet even crashing, it thrashed. Frost spread along Rhaegal's forelimb, crystals blooming. Back to the wall, Jon shouted, voice stolen by wind. Rhaegal's wings labored as the frost crawled. Below, the Night King vanished into swirling snow, his army parting around him like a sea of death. They limped south. At Castle Blackhorns blared thrice, an alarm no living man desired. Tormund's archers lined the southern parapet with dragonglass arrows nocked, though threat came from the north face. Drogon landed first, his chest heaving, Daenerys sliding down before he'd stilled his wings. She ran to Jon as Rhaegal collapsed onto ramparts, forelimb encased in spreading rime. Hold him, Jon urged stable hands. Heat the forge. Bring every brazier. He hacked at the ice with Longclaw's flat to slow its creep, but each flake melted only to refreeze as needle-thin stalactites. Daenerys pressed both palms to the frost and spoke in high Valyrian words older than empire, an invocation of warmth, a lullaby for dragons. At her touch, faint red luminescence pulsed beneath the ice. Rhaegal growled, pain and gratitude entwined. Bit by bit, the rime retreated. Throughout the long day, Castle Black bristled. Free folk hammered new palisades across the tunnel exit. Gendry smiths stoked forge fires until smoke tinted sky a dusky charcoal. Bran's ravens flew messages southwest, to White Harbor, Deepwood, the Twins, summoning every able-bodied soul. One raven soared farther, past Maidenpool and Harrenhal, to the green fields of the Crownlands, where armies loyal to Queen Cersei lingered. Whether they would heed, none could guess. That night, as Jon stood watch beside recovering Rhaegal, Sansa's raven arrived. Her letter spoke of supply caravans ambushed by Karstark turncoats. Rumors said Cersei offered northern lords southern titles in exchange for neutrality. Jon crushed the parchment. He knew politics outlived any apocalypse. Daenerys joined him, exhaustion etched beneath eyes as bright as dragonfire. "We cannot hold the wall alone," she murmured. "We do not intend to." Jon nodded to the dark silhouette of Winterfell banners fluttering over Castle Black's gate. "But the living must unify in truth, not in fear of dragons." She tightened her cloak. "They fear what they do not know. Then they will know us." At dawn, Jon addressed the garrison. From atop the gatehouse, he spoke of the Night King's vast host, of the Dragon of Frost, of the spear that pierced sky. He told them the wall might break, and when it did, no castle south could stand unless men and women fought not as castles and houses, but as one. He bared Longclaw, held the pale wolf pommel high. "I am Jon Snow, once a bastard of Winterfell, once a brother of the Night's Watch, now king in the north by the will of my people. But titles mean nothing if the sun is devoured by endless night." He turned, extended his free hand to Daenerys. "This is Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, Queen of Dragons. She is my wife and my ally. Her fire will light our way, and our steel will guard hers. We are one army, the army of the living." Daenerys stepped forward, Drogon looming above like living night. "I crossed the world to free slaves from chains." Her voice ringing off ice. "Now I cross it again to break the final chain. The chain of death. Fight beside me, and I will fight beside you. Not as queen to subjects, but as woman to brothers and sisters." Silence yielded to a roar. First from wildlings, then from black-cloaked brothers, then unsullied striking shields. Even northern spearmen who weeks ago spat at word of foreign queen, joined the chorus. The sound rolled across the frozen landscape like the stirring of giants. That evening, Bran summoned Jon and Daenerys to the weirwood grove at the base of the wall. Snow drifted into Bran's lap, yet melted on contact with the faint warmth that radiated from him, as though the roots themselves kept him alive. "You must ride to the heart of winter," he said. Jon frowned. "Beyond the wall. Farther." Bran's eyes clouded. "There is a place where the world was first wounded by cold. The Night King's power is strongest there, but so is the flame that can undo him. An altar of black stone buried under eons of ice. If dragonfire touches it, the spell that animates his army will shatter." Daenerys exchanged a glance with Jon. "How do you know?" "I saw it when I touched the corpse dragon through the weirwood's sight. The altar thrums in its breast like a second heart." Jon considered. "A long journey through enemy-infested wastes." Bran nodded. "But his army marches south. His altar will be lightly guarded." He looked suddenly ancient. "Time runs thin. When the wall falls, the long night will follow in days, not years." Jon and Daenerys stood in heavy thought until Bran added softly, "The altar lies in a valley of blue fire, under a sky that never dawns. You will know it by the sound. The ice there sings. Da." They prepared at once. The vanguard would ride dragons and a small band of companions capable of moving silent and swift. Davos protested his sea legs ill-suited to frozen ravines. Tyrion confessed no wish to see what music ice could sing. But both agreed they must remain to coordinate the wall's defense. Grey Worm volunteered 50 unsullied, but Jon declined. Dragons could carry only so many, and stealth mattered. Instead, Jorah Mormont, Tormund, and Meera Reed would accompany, along with a handful of wildling rangers tempered to northern wastes. Bran insisted on joining. Through ravens he could guide them around white patrols. He would ride in a basket harnessed to Drogon's saddle, eyes clouded though mind wide as sky. Gendry was chosen too, for his smith's knowledge might prove vital if the altar demanded more than flame. Before dawn broke, the expedition assembled in the yard. Rhaegal's injured limb had healed enough for flight, shimmering scarred but strong. Drogon knelt, allowing Bran's wicker seat to be lashed behind Daenerys. Jorah strapped Valyrian armor over weather-stained cloak, clutching Heartsbane, the ancestral Tarly sword gifted by Samwell for this very purpose. Tormund hefted his ice-rimmed club and winked at Meera. "If the dead fancy a dance, we'll make music." Ed saluted Jon from the rampart, muttering, Try not to die. I can scarce keep your direwolf from eating half the storerooms as is. Jon smirked. Keep him fed. We'll return with an army of ghosts for him to chase. Ghost paced, whining protests at being left. But Jon knelt. Guard Castle Black. Guard Sansa. He scratched white fur between ears. Ghost nuzzled his face, then trotted to sit beside Ed. The dragons launched skyward, wings cracking like war drums. Snow devils spun beneath, swirling over men who watched with mingled awe and dread. As the two great beasts banked northward, the wall's torches flickered below. Dwarfed embers in an ocean of night. Hours passed on cutting winds. They flew above carven ice valleys where the aurora shimmered eerie green across perpetual dusk. Bran, eyes rolled white, whispered directions under his breath. Below, white columns trudged south in eerie silence. But the dragons soared high out of arrow range, their shadows blurred against swirling snow. By nightfall they saw it. A vast depression flanked by obelisks of black ice. Faint cobalt flames flickering within fissures. The air vibrated with low humming, as if an immense harp string thrummed beneath earth. The valley floor was eerily level, a frozen mirror reflecting stars. At its center jutted a monolith of onyx stone half-buried, surface covered in runes resembling those etched on the children of the forest's caves. Wisps of icy vapor coiled from it like breaths of a sleeping giant. They descended cautiously behind a ridge. Jon dismounted, boots cracking thin crust. Even through fur gloves, the cold bit with unnatural ferocity, numbing fingers within heartbeats. He motioned Tormund and Mira to scout the periphery. Jorah and Gendry unpacked satchels of dragonglass grenades, small earthen jars filled with powdered obsidian and oil. Davos brainstormed. Daenerys slid from Drogon, her breath fogging. She approached the monolith, Drogon stomping behind like an overprotective hound. Each step closer felt heavier, as though the air thickened. Bran, still in a trance, murmured, "Now." Now. Suddenly ice cracked. From beneath snow erupted humanoid forms, whites buried in weight. They sprang with skeletal hands, eyes blazing blue. Jorah swung Heartsbane, severing torsos. Jon clove one in half. Shards spraying. Tormund barreled through, crushing skulls with his club. Mira loosed dragonglass arrows, each impact extinguishing a blue gaze. More emerged, an encircling tide. Jon shouted. Rhaegal strafed overhead, releasing a sheet of fire. Whites crumpled, but those nearest the altar staggered on, flames extinguished by proximity's cold aura tada. Daenerys reached the stone. She pressed a palm to its surface. Frost immediately spread across her glove, creeping toward arm. She grimaced, but did not retreat. Drogon lowered his head, maw glowing crimson. Bran's voice, distant. Now. Drogon unleashed fire. A cone of blistering heat struck the monolith. For a heartbeat nothing happened. Flames skated off, turning to steam. Then a fissure bright as dawn split the stone, emitting a scream of shattering ice so piercing Jon thought his skull would crack. The glow intensified, pulsing red gold, then erupted. A shockwave blasted outward, hurling whites like leaves. Snow vaporized in an expanding ring. Every man was thrown to ground. Light consumed sky, a pillar reaching into the clouds, then imploded in absolute silence. When vision cleared, the monolith was gone. Only a scorched crater rimmed with glassy obsidian. A hush blanketed the valley. The eternal hum ceased. Jon staggered to feet. Around him whites lay inert, eyes dim, bodies rigid. He kicked one. It did not stir. Tormund whooped, punching air. Gendry exhaled a curse of wonder. Bran slumped, eyes returning to normal. "The chain is broken," he whispered. But a distant roar rent the stillness. Anguish, fury. The Night King felt his wound. Daenerys swayed. Jon caught her. Her glove cracked, fingers burned by frostbite. He pressed her hand to his lips. She managed a small smile, then nodded skyward. We fly home. Before he mends. They mounted. Drogon lifted from the crater amid rising flurries. Rhaegal followed, though slower, battle fatigue clinging. Flames still shimmered along Drogon's throat like coals in a forge's belly. As they banked south, Jon looked back. The valley's blue flames had vanished, replaced by dim red glow still fading. And in that vanishing, he felt hope kindle. The dead yet marched, but their heart lay shattered under dragonfire and stark resolve. Hours later, Castle Black's torches emerged through snow haze. Warning horns did not sound. Word had flown by Raven of their success. Yet on landing, Jon saw worry etched on Ed's face. The Night King's army had stalled, yes, but not broken. Its advance slowed to a crawl, reorganizing, perhaps seeking new will to bind it. But the wall remained intact, and beyond it, the living gathered. From the west rode the Glovers and Tallhearts with 2,000 spears. From the south marched Vale Knights under Lord Robert Arryn's banner, coaxed north by Sansa's deft pen. From White Harbor sailed Manderley ships, bearing grain and crossbows. Even a Lannister envoy arrived. Sir Jaime himself, golden hand glinting, offering Casterly rock steel, if not Cersei's crown. In the yard, Jaime met Daenerys' gaze. "I owe you nothing," he said, voice hoarse. "But I owe the living a debt." She studied him, weighing histories of fire and blood, then inclined her head. "Then stand with us, Kingslayer, and let debts be paid in full." Preparations resumed with fever. Gendry oversaw forges day and night, smelting dragonglass into spearheads, arrowheads, even thin razors for Vale lances. Tyrion devised catapults to fling pottery bombs filled with wildfire and obsidian shards. Grey Worm drilled composite regiments, unsullied shielded by northern archers. Dothraki cavalry screened by Arryn pikemen. Jon, Daenerys, and Bran convened each dusk near the wall's highest parapet. Bran's ravens shadowed the undead legions, watching their hesitant advance. "They search," Bran said, "for a new anchor." He looked at Jon. "The Night King's will endures, but dimmed. If we strike him before he binds again, we can scatter them forever." Daenerys paced, cloak billowing. "We face him on open ground." Jon shook his head. "Lure him to us. The wall's magic may be weakened, yet still hinders his crossing. He will seek a breach, maybe at Eastwatch, where storms erode foundations. We station Drogon and Rhaegal there with all our scorpions and catapults. Grey Worm holds the tunnel. If he shows, we unleash everything." Bran murmured agreement. Tyrion sketched lines across smashed wooden boards, noting wind directions and supply runner paths. Sansa's letters continued south, urging even Baratheon loyalists in Storm's End to march. A war of one realm against oblivion had begun. Days later, the horizon blossomed blue once more. The Night King's columns recoalesced, trudging toward Eastwatch. Their numbers reduced to half, perhaps, but still vast. Behind them lumbered dead giants hauling logs of frozen pine, siege rams tipped with ice steel. The corpse dragon, wings shredded, hobbled on the ground, but its breath smoked. Atop Eastwatch's bluff, Jon tightened saddle straps on Rhaegal Date. Daenerys stroked Drogon's snout, murmuring soft Valyrian. Archers lined ramparts with obsidian-feathered shafts, catapults cranked back with jars of wildfire. Grey Worm's phalanx waited beneath portcullis. Jaime Lannister commanded a rearguard of Westerland knights, Golden Lion standard beside Mormont Bear and Stark Wolf. Snow began to fall, thick, heavy blanketing footsteps before they formed. The dead approached in silence. Suddenly, the Night King emerged from the ranks, spear of crystal leveled, blue eyes fixed on the wall's arched gateway. He raised his free hand, and the corpse dragon struggled onto partial wings, leaping skyward with labored flaps. Jon and Daenerys vaulted aloft. Dragons met corpse dragon above the crashing surf of Skagos Sound. Below, flames and arrows rained upon white ranks. Obsidian shards exploded, scattering frost limbs. Giant rams splintered under catapult stones doused in green fire. Yet the dead pressed on, dredged by relentless command. High above, the duel resumed. Drogon grappling bone, Rhaegal ripping at remaining wing. Jon saw ice creeping anew across Rhaegal's neck, and then a spear flashed from below, hurled by the Night King, aimed not at the living dragons but at the wall's base. The spear smashed stone, exploding spells woven millennia ago. A tremor shuddered through ice. Cracks spiderwebbed. Eastwatch's central gate shattered, avalanche booming as tons of frozen masonry crashed. Whites poured through dust clouds. Grey worms unsullied met them. Spears bristling. The clash became chaos of black and white, steel and bone. Jon shouted to Daenerys, "They must slay the Night King now," while his guard thinned. He dove Rhaegal, weaving between catapult arcs, toward the White Walker, whose mere presence froze blood puddles to mirror for his reflection. Daenerys guided Drogon from the opposite side, pincer-like. The Night King stepped back, raising spear, but Tyrion's hidden scorpion, a monstrous crossbow, fired. A bolt thicker than mast screamed across field, impaling the Night King through flank. Crystal's spear fell from hand. Sapphire eyes widened. Jon leapt from Rhaegal's saddle, rolling across churned snow. Long claw drawn down. He sprinted. The Night King gripped the bolt, tried to pull, but obsidian-barbed head lodged fast. Jon swung. Valyrian steel met ancient ice flesh, cleaving torso. A sound like glass under hammer cracked the battlefield. The Night King's body erupted into shards of crystalline frost, raining down in glittering cascade. An instant later, whites collapsed where they stood. Marionettes with snipped strings. Giants toppled. Undead horses froze mid-rear dart-eyed. The corpse dragon uttered one last gargled screech before plummeting into surf, shattering on black rocks. Silence descended, broken only by ragged breaths of living soldiers. Snowflakes drifted, landing on unmoving corpses that now were only that. Corpses. Grey Worm raised his spear in salute. Unsullied echoed. Jaime dropped to one knee, exhaustion and awe. Jorah lowered Heartsbane, whispered a prayer for fallen. Tyrion, atop rampart, exhaled a laugh half sobbing. Daenerys landed beside Jon, eyes shining. He embraced her, heedless of armor or blood. Above them, dawn's first light broke through thinning clouds, staining sky pale gold. Sometime later, when fires of pyres lit Eastwatch's yard, and musicians began a tentative song of victory, Jon stood alone on the wall's edge. Ghost limped to his side, muzzle nudging hand. The dire wolf's coat glowed amber in torchlight. Daenerys joined, fitting her fingers between his. Together, they looked northward. The land beyond the wall, once veiled in perpetual storm, now lay calm under rising sun. A wilderness reclaimed from death. Jon spoke softly. "We will need years to heal." Daenerys squeezed his hand. "We have them now." Behind them, bells rang as lords toasted, as children born of disparate houses played beneath dragons perched like sleepy cats. Frontiers would still bleed. Politics would weave webs anew. But for this moment, the world exhaled, and the breath was warm. Jon turned to his queen wife, kissed frost from her lashes. Far below, the sea met ice with gentle hush, washing crimson from stones. The wall towered, cracked but standing, a reminder of night turned back. And on a battered parapet littered with broken spears, Bran watched with unfathomable eyes, seeing seasons yet unborn. Fields of summer barley waving where armies of whites once marched. Dragons' shadows floating over walled cities at peace. Children of Stark and Targaryen playing in courtyards trimmed with dragonstone carvings. History had been split like the altar, reforged in lives saved, not taken. Night had fallen, but dawn, at last, had answered. Ka. Heavy clouds drifted over Eastwatch by the sea long after the last white fell, but the snow they held never came. Instead, a hush settled across the battered fortress, as though the land itself tasted silence for the first time in an age. Smoke from funeral pyres drifted seaward, where churning waves clawed at the corpses of ice-fouled leviathans. The bitter tang of ash hung in every breath, refusing to let men forget what ruin had stood before them only hours earlier. Yet where ruin had ruled, the living now walked. Exhausted, bruised, hopeful men and women moving through the rubble with the careful reverence of mourners in a temple. Jon Snow paced the parapet, overlooking the sullen water. Somewhere below, carpenters hammered fresh beams into fractured ramparts, the clack of mallets echoing around stone turrets. Beside him, Davos Seaworth leaned on chilled battlements, gaze following black-smudged clouds, as though he could read the wind's omens in their slow curls. Davos' gloved fingers drummed unconsciously, counting tasks yet unfinished. Timber quotas, salt beef rations, ships due from White Harbor laden with winter barley and smoked eels. Jon admired Davos' brand of devotion, a piety not of prayers, but of numbers balanced, bellies filled, boots resoled. The world would fail without such men. Dragons and kings were loud, but the quiet rhythms kept life alive. Below, Unsullied marched in silent ranks, scouring every courtyard for shards of enchanted ice that might one day stir again. Each piece was gathered into iron cauldrons, then carried to roaring furnaces, where they hissed like snakes plunging into flame. Grey worms supervised with expressionless discipline. Here and there, wildlings joined the effort. Tormund Giantsbane still moved with a half-limp from the battle, though the wound in his thigh was stitched and slathered with honey and pine resin. He shouted jokes at Unsullied who did not understand them, then laughed at their puzzled stares. Near the stables, Mira Reed knelt over a collection of ice-edged blades, culled from the fallen walkers. Slender spears with shafts of unknown whitewood. Axes whose ghostly heads refused to melt even when thrust into coals. She catalogued them by instinct as much as curiosity. Gendry worked at a portable forge beside her, hammering Night King crystal into shards. He claimed might alloy with dragonglass, forging something deadlier still if the world required. No one truly wished it would again, but everyone knew it might. Their motions blended into the discordant music of survival. Hammers, saws, low-spoken oaths, barked orders. Jon turned from the sea and descended the tower stair, boots quickening. In the main hall, rough planks had been laid across shattered tables to fashion a makeshift longboard where scribes wrote names of the dead. Daenerys stood at the board's far end, reading each entry aloud to a few huddled survivors. She wore a cloak of muted gray trimmed with crimson thread, the Targaryen colors subdued out of respect for the solemn task. Her breath sometimes caught as she spoke a name. Sometimes powerful shoulders sagged, but she persisted because remembrance demanded no less. As Jon approached, she finished a line, quill trembling, and waved the scribe onward. Their eyes met. Grief recognized grief and folded into something firmer. Without words, he reached for her frost-split fingers. She closed her eyes, rested forehead against his. In that moment, the bustle receded. Only their shared pulse mattered, steady as the tide. When they parted, Tyrion joined them carrying a scroll sealed with wax bearing the Lion of Lannister. Jaime's first formal correspondence since Eastwatch's victory. Tyrion flicked the seal open with a knife tip, scanned quickly, then exhaled a sigh equal parts relief and exasperation. "He writes from the Trident," Tyrion said. "Cersei's forces linger near Harrenhal. They refuse to march northward, but send riders offering humanitarian aid, by which they apparently mean wagons of spoiled grain and barrels of Dornish red, watered thrice." A weary chuckle. "Jaime suggests we invite their envoys to Winterfell to witness the dragons firsthand. He believes fear will temper their plots faster than any letter." Daenerys' jaw tightened. "Fear rebuilt the Seven Kingdoms once. I would rather use hope." "Hope," Tyrion agreed, "is better wine. But one sometimes salts hope with fear to keep it from spoiling." He gestured at the hall where banners of wolf and dragon hung side by side. "You have both on display. Invite them north and let them choose which taste they prefer." Jon tummed the wolf pommel of Longclaw. "Let us bring hope south instead. We will ride to Winterfell, muster fresh hosts, then travel on to the Trident with dragons overhead. A show of unity." Daenerys' eyes softened. "And of mercy, if mercy is still a language the South understands." Tyrion tucked the scroll into his coat. "Mercy and pageantry. I'll draft the invitations. Though if Lord Robert Arryn continues fainting at the mere shadow of Drogon, We might supply extra cushions." "Them?" John allowed a ghost of a smile before turning to matters of travel. The column would depart Eastwatch in 3 days. Once wounded could march and stores were replenished. Rhaegal still nursed cracked scales across the neck where frostbite had eaten deep, and Bran urged caution. Better to let the dragon heal fully than risk new infection in flight. Drogon prowled the skies every dawn and dusk, sending flocks of gulls into panic as he scoured for unseen remnants of the dead. Ghost shadowed his patrols from rampart to rampart, following the dragon with uncanny intuition, a white arrow against high black wings. The second night after the battle, a feast of remembrance unfolded in the Eastwatch yard. Cauldrons of fish stew simmered over renewed hearths, their steam thick with haddock and kelp. Beer from Wintertown's last stores was thawed beside the heat, served in wooden cups that leaked if squeezed too hard. No minstrels had come. Instead, wildlings chanted ancient songs of the bards, their melodies drifting into melancholy harmonies as Northmen joined. Unsullied stood nearby, faces near emotionless, but when Grey Worm handed a drum to a Dothraki, rhythm quickly formed and merged with the voices. Jon sat on a rough bench beside Gendry, passing mugs down the line. Across the fire, he watched Daenerys speak quietly with Jorah and Missandei. Candlelight danced on her silver hair, catching fleeting tears she did not wipe. Beyond her, Tyrion told some jest to Davos, who barked a laugh that rose like a gull's cry into the star-flecked night. And there among them all, Bran sat in his wheeled chair, hood fur-lined, eyes half-closed though distant ravens soared overhead. Jon felt the moment imprint on his bones, a rare stillness carved from chaos, fragile as frost, lovely as dawn. Yet dawn does not linger. 3 days later, banners edged with mourning wool fluttered along the King's Road, announcing the long march back to Winterfell. They traveled down the Gif's open sweep, where spring's first thaws turned snow to silver slush that soaked boots and splattered horses. Free folk herds already wandered those fields, planting cairns where their dead would rest. Some raised new timber halls beside abandoned keeps, forging a future no southerner had imagined. Late on the 4th day they reached Last River's ford, swollen by meltwater. Engineers hammered plank bridges guided by Gendry's eye, while Jorah's outriders scouted beyond for traces of Karstark holdouts rumored to harry return caravans. None appeared. Perhaps whispers of dragonfire extinguished any lingering disobedience. Children of half a dozen northern houses lined rutted tracks, waving scraps of cloth, dyed in stark gray or bright crimson as the column passed. They had never seen a queen, and some wept at the sight of Daenerys atop her chestnut mare, cloak shimmering like a red sunrise on snow. She dismounted often to place a hand on small shoulders, to listen to tales of lost fathers, to promise grain shipments, and the safe return of brothers yet unaccounted. Word spread faster than her horse could carry her. The Dragon Queen promised bread. Winterfell came into view at dusk 12 days after Eastwatch, the ancient walls patchworked with scaffolds, new roof slates glimmering where fires had recently scorched. Smoke rose from forges, throwing sparks into cold twilight. Jon felt a pulse of pride and ache. Pride that his home still stood, ache for the scars it bore. Sansa met them at the gate, flanked by Lord Wyman Manderley and Lady Lyanna Mormont. She wore a gown of midnight blue heavy, with weirwood red embroidery. Her auburn hair, coiled in a coronet simple and strong. When Daenerys dismounted, Sansa stepped forward and clasped her forearms in the northern fashion. No curtsy, but mutual recognition. Sister and queen, both forged by siege and snow. Inside, the great hall had been cleared of rubble. Long trestles held freshly quartered venison, root vegetables, loaves of brown bread. Prisoners of the Karstark rebellion were marched before Daenerys and Jon. Most were boys no older than 16, eyes hollow with fear. Sansa spoke first, voice even. They fought from compulsion, not zeal. Jon gazed at each face. The war of the dead is over. The land needs farmers more than corpses. He declared them bound to a season of labor rebuilding watchtowers and mending roads. If they served well, their families' debts would be forgiven. The decree rippled through the hall. Some murmured that mercy endangered discipline, but others, hearing the news, pressed palms to hearts in relief. That night, Jon sought the gods' wood, Daenerys at his side, beneath the towering weirwood whose leaves glowed crimson, even in darkness. Snow dusted the branches, shaking loose whenever the wind sighed. They knelt, neither speaking. Their joined hands rested on cool roots, sap oozing beneath bark like slow blood. Daenerys' whisper broke the quiet. "Will your gods ever accept a woman of Valyria?" Her breath ghosted white. Jon's thumb traced her knuckles. "The old gods watch all men. Free folk, queens of dragons. They know hearts, not banners." He kissed her hand. "Besides, they accepted a bastard once." She smiled faintly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Then let them accept our child." Jon held still. Time folded. "Our child?" She turned her face, breath shaky with vulnerability. "The healers, after Eastwatch, told me life could yet quicken. I thought the dragons were my only children. Perhaps I was wrong." He drew her close, heart hammering. Past wounds, once fatal, opened anew. Fear of futures he could not shield. But also joy, fierce and overwhelming. The godswood seemed to breathe around them, leaves stirring though no wind blew. Somewhere overhead, Rhaegal's warble answered distant as thunder, and Ghost's howl rose from rampart to mingle in strange harmony. The news changed everything and nothing. In council, the next day, Jon announced that Queen Daenerys required time to rest, but the realm required action. A grand assembly, some called it a great council, would be held at Harrenhal come midsummer. There, lords of every region would gather to declare allegiance, settle borders, negotiate levies for a shattered kingdom, needing roads, granaries, healing caught. Bran would travel south with them, greenseer and witness to the war's truths. His visions would quell denial in skeptical southern courts. Sansa would remain in Winterfell as Lady Regent of the North. Tyrion loved the plan for its pragmatic drama. Harrenhal is scarred by conquest, he mused. Its melted towers remind all what dragons may do. But within those vast halls, one can sit 10,000 souls, break bread among them, and they cannot claim ignorance of each other's hunger. Preparations spiraled outward. Maesters across castles transcribed decrees. Messengers rode from Bear Island to Sunspear, bearing letters sealed with intertwined direwolf and dragon. Jon traveled to the Wall once more, delivering to Lord Commander Ed the news that Castle Black would thrive again as a bastion of learning and refuge. Not simply a prison. Ed, war as ever, muttered that a library required a roof that did not leak, then set men to copper the shingles. Spring crept into the north faster than any could remember in living memory. Perhaps a gift of magic uncoiled. Perhaps chance. Snowdrifts receded, revealing mossy earth. Buds swelled on birch branches. Farmers spoke of early thaw as omen. The land, it seemed, was eager to forget the chill of unquiet dead and embrace warmth again. But forgetting is never so simple. At Deepwood Motte, restless sellswords hired by ironborn raiders tested new alliances, pillaging an outlying sheepfold. Lord Glover dispatched riders for aid. Lady Lyanna received the Raven, mounted her shaggy Geron, and rode with 62 men to chase the intruders all the way to the shore, where Drogon's shadow frightened the longships into dumping their plunder and fleeing. Daenerys did not command Drogon to burn them. The dragon roared, seawater steaming beneath black flame that never fully touched wood. The raiders rode for their lives. Word spread that the Dragon Queen spared those who sought mercy, but the sea itself boiled if they tested her heart. Southward, Cersei Lannister's court seethed with rumor. Some claimed the Night King still lived in secret, others that Jon and Daenerys meant to enthrone a child with demonic powers. Yet as ravens poured into the rock bearing personal accounts of undead horrors, shrill protest softened. Ser Jaime's vanguard of Westerland knights grew each week. Men tired of Cersei's endless suspicion. They marched under a new banner. A crimson field bearing a white lion rampant, stitched with a direwolf and a dragon spiraling around its mane. The symbol confused many. A union yet unratified. A dream not quite woken. But the men marched anyway, for they had seen enough war to risk hope. Midsummer heat arrived in waves from the south. By then, Daenerys' condition was noticeable under flowing gowns. A gentle swell at her waist. She refused to ride astride. Instead, she perched on Drogon's neck in the cool of upper air, Jon close behind on Rhaegal. Their progress south to Harrenhal became less a march than a pilgrimage. Small folk lined dusty lanes waving barley stalks. Bakers tossed crusts into the column's path. Believing dragons brought fertile ash to fields. In some villages, septons rang bells day and night, proclaiming the long night's end. In others, heart-tree groves welcomed Bran like a wandering prophet. Children touching his hand. Mothers laying bundles of newborn herbs at his feet for blessings. 5 leagues north of Harrenhal, the King's Road split into marshland track. The company paused to water horses beside a shallow pond thick with lilies. Tyrion dismounted, limped to the water's edge, and knelt to scoop a handful. He lifted it to his lips, then blinked at faint ripples. Tadpoles were wriggling, not yet nipped by frost. Everything is early, he mused. Jon joined him, knelt, his reflection shifting across the surface. Springs come like it remembers being chased, Tyrion said. Perhaps it fears we'll shackle it if it lingers. Jon skimmed a pebble, watching circles grow. We fought for Dawn. We didn't think about what Dawn asks in return. Rebuilding, Tyrion answered. Always more tedious than torching. Jon grinned quietly. Which you prefer? Oh, give me a good blaze any day. But I'm learning to appreciate bricks. The imp slapped muddy water from his palms. Speaking of, Harrenhal stands ahead. Melted towers and ghosts of Aegon's wrath. Perfect stage for our next miracle. Harrenhal loomed soon after. Vast curtain walls slumped like half-melted candles, towers sheared and open to sky. But within its ruined shell, thousands of tents sprawled. Banners of the Reach, Dorne, the Vale, the Riverlands. Even houses long thought extinct, fluttered together. Dappled deer, flayed men reluctantly pardoned under new lords. Krakens of ironborn throngs who pledged loyalty once Euron vanished at sea. At night, cook fires peppered the broken courtyards like glowing embers in a shattered forge. The council convened under the vaulted remnants of King Harren's audience chamber, its ceiling lost to dragonfire centuries ago. Sunlight poured through jagged gaps, painting leaf-like patterns upon ancient basalt. There, lords and ladies stood not in tiers of rank, but in a broad circle. At its center, a single stone dais remained, scorched black, where Aegon the Conqueror's shadow had once danced. Jon and Daenerys mounted the dais together, her hand in his. Bran sat slightly behind, eyes placid. Tyrion and Sansa flanked his hands of east and north. Davos and Grey Worm served as captains of witness. Jaime came representing the Westerlands, armored in plain steel, save the golden hand, which he hid beneath a leather glove to avoid memory of severed oaths. The murmurs hushed. Jon spoke first, a low voice, shaped by nights on ice and halls of broken vows. He told them of heart trees and wildling free births, of graves carved in the white waste. He described how Ghost paced restless beside dragons' eyries, as though wolves and drakes recognized each other's right to guard the world's edge. He confessed he was born in secrecy, raised as a bastard, but learned that men may rise no matter the cradle if they fight for the realm that needs them. He finished by inviting all to speak without fear. No man or woman would be silenced by dragons or wolves. Sebastian Hightower of Old Town, ancient and stooped, smiled at that. Lady Rohan Dane murmured that Dawn indeed belonged to all. Daenerys spoke next. She did not offer titles nor threats. She offered service. She would not claim the Iron Throne by conquest. Instead, she proposed a council of equal seats, a round keep, some later called it, where each region sent chosen voices for matters of war and peace. She would bear the crown of Westeros, not as sovereign above all, but as first regent answerable annually to that council. When her child came of age, he or she would inherit not by blood alone, but by vote of that same body. The words unsettled many, but none could call them mere tyranny. In the hush that followed, Bran's voice echoed, mild and certain. The past is written. The ink is dry. Let us choose the pen for tomorrow. Small folk among the rafters cheered before lords could decide. Debate raged for 3 full days, yet swords never left scabbards. When tongues sharpened, Drogon's roar from a distant tower reminded them of the alternative history they'd avoided. At last they agreed to a charter. The Crownlands would be renamed the Heartlands, territory reserved for shared stewardship. Each kingdom would govern its own customs, but pay levy to maintain 3 standing orders: the Dragon's Guard, unsullied Northmen, Dothraki volunteers knitted into one; the Night's Watch reborn as Rangers of the Dawn; and the Keepers of Lore, an order of maesters and children of the forest. On the final evening, beneath a sky streaked purple by stormlight, all counselors gathered on Harrenhal's ruined rampart. Jon and Daenerys stood before them, winds tugging cloaks, torches flickering between crenellations. Daenerys drew breath and announced her pregnancy. Gasps broke. Some bowed at once. Others stared as though seeing myth walk. But none spoke dissent. For the future plainly grew not from fear, but from the life inside the Dragon Queen. Symbol of houses joined, ice and fire reconciled. Months passed like pages fluttering. In early autumn, King's Landing crested the horizon. Its walls scorched yet unbroken. Cersei Lannister stood upon Maegor's holdfast, surveying the approach of dragons with unreadable gaze. Yet when Drogon descended, his wings casting night across the Red Keep's courtyard, she did not flee. She marched forth in black mourning gown, escorted by a score of gold-cloaked Lannister guards. Jaime met her halfway. No armor, no weapons. Their conversation carried too softly for others to hear. It ended with Cersei turning, gaze brittle, and walking back to the keep. The doors closed behind her as rumor later whispered. She locked herself in her father's study, sat at the great desk, and signed abdication. Whether shame or weariness drove her, none could say. Jaime presented that parchment to the Round Keep 2 weeks later. The council acknowledged it, granting her exile to Casterly Rock under guard, but free to oversee the restoration of war-torn Westlands. Tyrion offered to visit, but Jaime shook his head. Tyrion understood. Some wounds never seek witness. Dragons wheeled in the skies of King's Landing, but no flames touched the city. Streets previously muddied by years of neglect were swept. Small folk assembled along the processional route, clutching fragrant sprigs of lavender and sage to scent the wind. As the dragons alighted on Aegon's high hill, bells rang. Not the bells of surrender, but of renewal. Jon dismounted first, offering a hand to Daenerys. She stepped onto the marble courtyard where once wildfire had burned so bright. Now pale sun, gentle as spring water, warmed the stones. They did not seat themselves upon the Iron Throne that day. Instead, they walked past it, open doors behind, to the courtyard where children pressed faces through gate bars. Jon lifted one boy, grime-streaked, to see Drogon's folded wings. Daenerys knelt beside a girl missing 2 fingers, offered her a token, a small steel direwolf cast by Gendry, now turned courtsmith. Old knights watched and whispered to squires, "This is how rule begins, on knees, not thrones." When winter came again, it was mild. Snow touched King's Landing rooftops briefly and melted by noon. In Winterfell, Sansa hosted feasts for delegations of the Reach, bringing new seeds bred in Old Town's glass gardens, rumored to sprout in half the usual time. Lady Lyanna oversaw free folk markets outside the castle walls, where mammoth fur traded for glass beads from Dorne. In Sunspear, Princess Arianne corresponded with Missandei about maritime laws to curb slavery resurgence. At the Citadel, Gilly studied to become the first woman to earn a maester's chain. Bran often wandered in mind across groves unseen. From time to time he stirred at small council meetings, speaking riddles, of Ironborn finding peace in kelp forests, of knights guiding plowshares instead of lances. Others rolled eyes. Tyrion scribbled notes, for riddles he claimed made good policy if decoded quick. The years turned. In the second year of King Jon and Queen Daenerys' reign, though official terms called them guardians of the Round Keep, their child was born at Dragonstone. A girl with her mother's silvery hair and her father's gray eyes. She wailed so loud the ravens roosting on the stone drum scattered into the night. Drogon roared back from his cliff roost, and Rhaegal answered. They named her Lyanna Alysanne, after 2 fierce northern queens of legend. The child warmed even the most skeptical lords. Seeing the living future in swaddled cloth made talk of border skirmishes feel small. In north and south alike, smithies rang forging plowshares from melted swords. Yet some swords remained, hung in halls as grim reminders. Direwolves roamed the godswoods, dragons patrolled skies, but the realm learned neither creature sought blood needlessly. They were guardians, as were the men and women who had bound them. One crisp morning, Jon and Daenerys stood atop the wall once more. Rime dusted their cloaks, but no dark host gathered beyond. Only wind-carved plains shimmering under pale sun. Bran had dreamt the land would heal if left untrodden, if hunters took only what necessity demanded, if the living treated the grave of the dead with reverence. So Jon declared the wilderness beyond the wall a sanctuary. Rangers of the Dawn would walk its edge, not as wardens but as wardens of memory, carrying songs instead of horns of alarm. Free folk guided them, and in return the crown funded new villages in the gift. Jon's breath hung before him steaming. He glanced at Daenerys, her cheeks flushed, eyes reflecting whiteness stretching to horizon. "Do you ever miss the uncertainty?" he asked. She thought, "Uncertainty taught us value. But I do not miss it." She pulled her cloak around her and added, smiling, "I would not choose peace over purpose. Yet perhaps they can walk together." He nodded. "We shape the world now not by war, but by each day's small choices." He watched as Ghost padded ahead, sniffing drifted snow, then bounded down stone steps to where a group of children from Hardhome played with carved wooden wolves. They screamed delight when Ghost joined, tail wagging. Overhead, 3 dark shapes moved among clouds. Drogon, Rhaegal, and above them a speck. A fledgling hatchling of a crimson egg found in Dragonstone's vault. The dragon's shadows rippled across the wall's face, and the children pointed up, laughter echoing. Jon turned back to the land he once feared impossible to save. Light glittered on distant ice like shattered diamonds. Somewhere in that stillness lay scars of a broken altar, shards swallowed by snow, their power spent. He felt Daenerys' hand slip into his. Fingers laced, they stood silently until the sun climbed, its warmth brushing cheeks chilled by past storms. Below, bells clanged from Castle Black. A call not of alarm, but of mealtime. The smell of stewing venison wafted on wind. Earthly and alive, they walked down, guardians returning among their people. Dragons gliding overhead like omens turned to blessings. And for the first time in living memory, Westeros breathed without dread of dusk. It breathed full and deep, like a land waking from nightmare into a day whose colors seemed impossibly bright. Ya, Kai. Morning mist clung to the weirwood palisades of Castle Black, drifting in pale ribbons across the courtyard, where Jon Snow sparred with a handful of young recruits. The clack of practice swords echoed between towers freshly refitted with slate tiles, and the boys, sons of wildlings, hill tribes, and minor northern houses, moved in nervous circles, trying to read the rhythm of their kin's footwork. Frost still glazed the flagstones, turning every misstep into a slip. Jon disarmed the Tallheart lad with a twist of the wrist. The blade skittered across the stones. Ghost, watching from the stair, cocked his head in mild approval. When Jon waved the next boy forward, his thoughts snagged on the sky above. The same sky where, only 3 nights earlier, a meteoric streak had burned a brief wound of white gold fire. The keepers of lore argued it augured fruitful harvests. Seers in Qarth wrote that the last dragon egg in the world had answered the heavens. Jon felt no dread, merely a quiet curiosity. The world kept changing faster than old stories could catch it. By the end of drill, the recruits' cheeks blazed, breath fogging in ragged bursts. Jon dismissed them with a nod. He wiped Longclaws flat with an oiled rag, his mind already on the council session waiting across the courtyard. Davos Raven from White Harbor had arrived at dawn. Inside, a terse report of strange sails, prowling the Bight and rumors of slavers, probing ports newly softened by peace. Jon sheathed the sword and crossed to the armory door where Samwell Tarly, gown half-buttoned, spectacles crooked, hurried to keep pace. They brought another cache of manuscripts from Old Town. Sam said, puffing as they climbed narrow steps toward the solar where Bran often waited. Old Valyrian treatises on dragon husbandry, but also shipping logs from before the doom. They mention, Volantene free companies running spies through the narrow sea centuries ago. Jon raised an eyebrow. You think the slaver fleets off White Harbor are Volantene? Hard to ignore the parallel. Sam adjusted his glasses. Different banners perhaps, but coin travels in familiar circles. They entered the solar where sunlight poured through high arrow slits, painting Bran Stark in a halo at the room's center. He sat motionless in a carven weirwood wheelchair, though his pale eyes tracked ravens far beyond the walls. Tyrion stood by the hearth examining charts. Grey Worm waited with arms crossed. On a low table, Daenerys fingered a wax tablet dotted by black ink footprints. Her daughter Lyanna Alysanne's first steps captured in melted wax before they dried. Daenerys' smile remained small but unguarded, the simple pride of a mother etched behind queenly poise. She glanced up as Jon entered. Grey Worm brings tidings from Essos, she said. The Triarchs of Volantis gather sell sails at the Black Walls. Some banners display a golden chain upon scarlet. Jon's jaw tightened. A slaver's emblem. Tyrion tapped the chart. Reports speak of a so-called Golden Liberty Company commandeering old Valyrian galleys. They claim to avenge trade lost to dragons. I doubt they'll challenge a realm at full strength. But ports half rebuilt, merchants flush with northern timber, and a river mouth guarded by 3 longships and optimism that they may test. Bran's voice drifted, light as falling snow. Ships sail. Shadows ride in their hulls, not men alone. Everyone quieted. Bran's gaze focused far away, pupils dilated. I saw sails striped like venom, and beneath their decks a priest of masks chanting to unborn storms. Daenerys set Lyanna's wax tablet aside. We will send a fleet to intercept. Sir Davos commands the royal squadrons at Dragonstone. He'll relish a chance to teach slavers humility. Tyrion nodded. 2 or 3 swift galleys with dragons overhead should turn them. He turned pages of the chart. But we must keep dragons close to the capital as well. Faith militant remnants still mutter that demons perch on the Red Keep. Jon folded arms. I'll ride east with Rhaegal and a troop of rangers. Show the small ports we stand watch. Daenerys opened her mouth to object, then caught his eye and read determination there. She exhaled slowly. Take Jorah, some Dothraki outriders, and Nyra Sand. Her Dornish galleon outruns most slaving skiffs. Grey Worm cleared his throat. I will accompany. Tyrion's brow rose. An unsullied commander at sea? Grey Worm's expression did not waver. Slavers belong to the past. I guard the future. Jon clasped his shoulder. Then we sail within the week. Sam, gather what maps you have on Volantene sea lanes. Then? Sam blinked. I need longer to copy them, but yes. Daenerys lifted Bran's slender hand. And you? She asked softly. What do the ravens counsel? Bran's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. Perhaps remembrance of something centuries away. The sea is restless, but not your only storm. Beyond the neck the barrows wake. Ancient oaths stir. He focused on Jon again. The last horn of Joramun lies unbroken beneath a barrow of the first kings. If wrong hands lift it, the wall may sing once more, but not for us. Silence rippled. Tyrion broke it. We patched the wall as best we could. Are you saying someone may bring it down again? The wall stands not by stone alone. A horn woven of weirwood and dragonglass could call the old spells to sleep. Daenerys frowned. Then who would seek such a horn now? Bran blinked. Someone who fears dragons more than winter. Someone who makes allies of shadows. Jon exchanged glances with Daenerys. We guard the barrows while we guard the sea. That night torches lined Winterfell's east yard as Nyra Sand's sleek galleon, Stormchild, readied for departure. Sails dyed indigo fluttered under an early moon. Jorah Mormont supervised loading of barrels, grain, arrows, dried fish. Grey Worm inspected each stack. Jon strapped on mail of blackened steel, kissed Lyanna sleeping in Daenerys' arms, murmured a promise that bedtime stories would resume when he returned. Daenerys touched his cheek, whispering, "Bring hope to the seas." He mounted Rhaegal, who rumbled low in greeting. They lifted skyward, Stormchild unfurled canvas, and glided northeast down the White Knife, into the Bite's steel-gray waves. At dawn, Nyra called course toward narrow sea shoals, where traders often vanished. Her braided jet hair whipped in salt wind as she shouted orders in soft Dornish accent. "Brace the yards, keep to the shelf." Slaver hulls draw deeper. For 3 days, nothing more menacing than half-sunken drift ice challenged them. On the 4th, pale dawn revealed black sails on the horizon. 3 carvels in line astern. Their prows bore stylized iron faces with ruby eyes. Gendry, dispatching overseer of a cannon crew borrowed from Lannisport, muttered, "Those rubies aren't glass." Nyra lifted a spyglass. "Slave catchers." Small, but arrogant. Jon wheeled Rhaegal above cresting waves, the dragon's wingtips blackening clouds. The slaver helmsman hesitated. One ship heeled away, trying to run. Nyra ordered Stormchild's ballista loosed. A bolt streaked, shattered the fleeing helm's mainmast. Grey Worm led 10 unsullied by rope ladders onto the crippled deck, before grapples anchored. Their spears flashed. Chains clanged. Jon landed Rhaegal to bar the quarterdeck. He found half-starved summer islanders chained to benches. With a shout he severed fetters, handed keys to a gaunt woman who whispered prayers to seeds of palm he still clutched. Grey Worm faced the slaver captain, a Volantine in purple stripes, trembling. "Name those who hired you," he demanded. The man spat. Grey Worm's spear butt cracked ribs. He gasped, "Crocasia." "The masked priests of R'hllor's lost sister." Jon frowned. Sam Scroll had mentioned such cults, an offshoot preaching redemption through enslavement. Their symbol, a golden chain. Grey Worm bound the captain, marched him to Jon. "He gives only riddles." Jon's face hardened. Let the freed decide his fate. By sunset, the freedfolk chose exile in a rowing dinghy. One skin of water. Justice swift yet merciful compared to the hold had kept. The other 2 slaver ships scuttled. Their crews surrendered without fight, trembling at the dragon overhead. Nyra's sailors ferried survivors to Stormchild's brig. Lists of names were copied. Brands documented for later reparation in Meereen. That night, Jon paced Stormchild's quarterdeck under constellations shimmering like new forged steel. Grey Worm joined, quiet. "You did not burn them," he said. "Fear rules too quickly," Jon answered. "We chose message over massacre." Grey Worm looked at his palm, scarred by lash long ago. "Some lessons need fire." He lifted eyes. "But I follow." Across the narrow sea, in the dockside taverns of Volantis, dust-thick rumors spread that dragonfire spared slavers. Some cackled at weakness. Others whispered that this new king might be bargained with for profit. In a shadowed booth, a priestess with a lacquered mask, shaped like an eyelid, listened. She drew patterns and spilled wine. "A horn? Find it," she told her companion. A cell sail with fingers missing from both hands. "The price," he claimed, "for stealing secrets in Korth. The ice horn brings walls down. Where walls fall, dragons roost uneasy." Back in Westeros, Winterfell's courtyards brimmed with summer bustle. Gendry's mobile forges produced plow blades, etched with direwolves, sold cheaply to coax small folk into Springfields. Sansa held audiences 4 days a 10-day, hearing disputes over creek boundaries, granting charters to potters who had lost kilns to ice storms. Above her dais hung House Stark's restored banners, but below stood a mapboard cluttered with coin tallies, seed ledgers and drawings Gilly mailed from Old Town of a new windmill design that turned grain thrice faster than oxen. One afternoon, Mira Reed arrived, mud-flecked, with strange news. In the Barrowlands, hollow men dug under cover of night, seeking something sealed in cairn of twisting trees. Sansa dispatched a raven to Castle Black. Bran's reply arrived within hours. "Guard the barrow, but do not disturb." He would come. So it was that Bran Stark, riding a wicker basket slung between Drogon's shoulders, flew to the Barrow of Kings. Daenerys accompanied in smaller harness, though at 7 months swelling she rode gingerly. Below, Jorah led 1,000 Dothraki outriders and northern volunteers, their whispers hushed by the sight of a queen heavy with child, yet shepherding them. The barrow rose like a slumbering bear, turf-covered stones arranged in concentric rings, each carved with weirwood knots. Twilight settled, fireflies bobbed like souls. At the entrance, Bran's ravens perched by the hundreds. A silent congress. Sansa waited, having established a perimeter of archers. She bowed to Bran, then embraced Daenerys carefully, smile rueful at how much the queen's frame had changed. Bran held out his hand, palm outward. The ravens murmured, wings stirring, then launched as one, swirling overhead. Bran's eyes whitened. "They tunneled near the heart," he whispered. Voice of many, driven by greed and fear. He directed Jorah and the outriders into the hillside cavern. They found 3 men digging, clad in northern leathers, but bearing tattoos of the Summer Isles, tongues silenced by coins. At their feet rested a horn twice the height of a man, black as moonless sea, banded by runes of obsidian. Its surface felt colder than death. Jorah ordered it, wrapped in furs, carried to Bran. Bran laid a hand on it, closed eyes. Frost crackled where skin met horn, but Bran did not flinch. "It calls to walls," he said softly. "Blood on snow." Suddenly he withdrew fingers, breathing fast. "Bury it again. Deeper. We mask its song." But Daenerys, one hand on her belly, answered, "Better to melt its voice." She turned to Drogon, who waited behind stones. Whether flame could destroy such an artifact none knew, yet the dragon lowered his head. Bran murmured, "Be certain." Daenerys nodded once. Drogon's jaws opened. A thin, controlled jet of white-hot flame bathed the horn. Runes glowed crimson, then violet, then exploded in a hiss of steam. When flame ceased, shards of slag lay smoking. Bran touched one. Warm. He smiled faintly. Sansa exhaled. "That bit of history I won't miss." But far away, across silent seas shifting black, the masked priestess felt an echo snap. A thread severed. She closed her painted eyelids, tasted salt. "Then we wake older things," she whispered. In King's Landing, autumn colors adorned the replanted gardens of the Red Keep. Golden oaks, crimson maples imported from Riverland's nurseries. Tyrion supervised masons. A new small council chamber, overlooking Blackwater Bay. The room's round table, carved of weirwood and ironwood braided together, could seat 40. Some joked it symbolized a wheel broken. Others, a wheel reforged. Tyrion only cared that there was wine within arm's reach and cross breezes to keep summer heat at bay. One late afternoon, Jaime arrived with an entourage of Western Reeves bearing ledgers. He wore plain leathers, the gold hand concealed. Over 3 goblets they reviewed crop taxes. Grain yields in the Golden Sound rose thanks to Reach seeds. Tariffs on Dornish lemons dipped due to a galleon shortage. Tyrion listened, scribbling. Then Jaime spoke in low tone. "Cersei's letters have grown erratic. She writes of ghosts in father's halls, claims a dragon's eye watches her bedchamber." Tyrion swirled wine. "Guilt wears many masks." Jaime's jaw flexed. "We owe her dignity in exile, but she may attempt something rash. We should post healers, or historians," Tyrion muttered, "to chronicle the unraveling." News from the north arrived 2 days later. The Horn destroyed, slaver fleet scattered, Queen Daenerys resting at Winterfell for the final months of pregnancy. Tyrion penned a decree, naming Sansa official steward of the North, and Lady Lyanna Mormont commander of the Northern Levy, but needed signatures. Jaime offered to ride, craving cold air. Tyrion smiled. Old knights seldom sit idle long. He also drafted letters to the Triarchs, couched in civil terms yet edged with steel. Any ship flying slave banners would be treated as enemy of the realm. He invited Volantis to send ambassadors to inspect conditions of freed crews rescued, a subtle threat of public shame. The response might be slow, but truth nipped lies eventually. Winterfell bristled under first hard frost when Nyra Sand rode from White Harbor, bringing news that Stormchild had sighted sleek green sails near Skagos. Pirates from the Stepstones perhaps, but disciplined. Nyra's cheek bore a new scar. A slaver blade had grazed her as she cut a chain. She grinned at Sansa's concern. Scars breed stories. Stories breed fear in enemies. She broke into Dornish song by the hearth that night, voice low and sultry, until even stoic guards smiled. Jon returned 3 days later, windburned and weary yet triumphant. He clasped Daenerys, whispered the sea lanes were clear for now. She laughed, pressed his salt-tanged hair to her lips, and told him the baby kicked fiercest whenever Drogon roared. A dragon in the making. She teased. They walked the battlements at dusk, north wind tasting of eternity. Jon spoke of plans to seed new watchposts along the shore. Towers flying banners of direwolf and trident to remind raiders that the north kept a river's bite in its veins. Daenerys leaned against parapet stone. And after the watchposts, we raise schools. Jon nodded toward the courtyard where wildling and northern children practiced letters with Missandei under flickering torchlight. Knowledge fights winter longer than swords. Daenerys' eyes shone. Then we forge books as fiercely as blades. That night Bran sent word that he dreamt of a tree blossoming in the Dornish desert, petals white like weirwood snow. Symbol, he said, of cold peace reaching warm sands. Daenerys drafted a letter to Princess Arianne. She would tour Dorne after the birth, to see with her own eyes that the desert indeed dared bloom white. In late winter, snow fell thick across the world's heart, muffling every sound. Frost feathered Dragonstone's basalt spires where Daenerys chose to give birth, trusting the island's ancient medicines and deep-heated springs. Melisandre, returned from far-shadowed lands, stood robed in red to monitor warding fires. She had renounced prophecies of chosen princes, but still, her incense soothed pain. Lyanna Alysanne toddled through corridors, clutching a stuffed direwolf sewn by Sansa. Ghost tolerated her giggled tugs of his ears, while Rhaegal dozed on tower parapet, nostrils emitting gentle smoke swirls. Jon paced outside the birthing chamber until Davos smuggled him a flask of summer wine. "To occupy your hands, lad." On the third hour of labor, a cry pierced the keep, half pain, half triumph, followed by an infant's first wail. Higher, stronger than Lyanna's had been. A moment later Missandei emerged, cheeks wet, telling him mother and son thrived. Jon entered trembling. Daenerys lay on linen damp with sweat, hair plastered to her brow, but eyes alive with elation. In her arms lay a small bundle, skin ruddy, fists pumping. Jon knelt, voice breaking. "A boy." Daenerys nodded. "Aegar, Eddard." Jon swallowed emotion. Daenerys continued softly. "A name to bind the past and forgive it." A torch guttered, Drogon's flame, and shadows danced across the walls like wings. The next spring blossomed in earnest. Apple orchards near River Run bore fruit early. Arbor vintages ripened sweeter despite shorter seasons. Highgarden's new lady, Allery Rowan, sent barrels of golden vintage north as tribute for the newborn prince. In Dorne, white blossoms, actually pale bougainvillea bred by glasshouse alchemists, began creeping over palace walls. Legend named them Snowfires. A story bloomed that the Dragon Queen's sigh carried seeds on southern wind. But not all blossomed bright. Word came that Euron Greyjoy's battered flagship Silence limped into the city of Tyrosh, seeking Sellswards. He bore a false eye socket, black with rot. Rage festered. He promised Tyroshi Archons a Kraken's share of new trade routes if they funded an Ironborn resurgence. The Archons laughed, until he laid a direwolf's pelt before them, claiming he slew the beast guarding northern ports. The pelt belonged to a wolf stolen from a Stark supply convoy, no relation to Ghost. Yet the gesture pricked pride. Tyrosh's coffers opened a crack. Slaver captains pledged coin. Sails began sewing again, purple and green stripes, Kraken sigils defaced by chains. In Bravos, faceless men whispered that the tide smelled of blood future. They watched, for coin, for curiosity. In Westeros, councils read the signs. Jon commissioned Nyra to lead a second fleet south to Storm's End, where Lord Gendry, newly legitimized Baratheon, had expanded dry docks. Tall war dromons, hulls painted midnight, awaited christening. Dawn's Howl, Lady of Winter, Windsinger. Nearest shipwrights strengthened prows to ram ironclad reavers. Meanwhile, Daenerys and Tyrion convened artisans from Qarth, glassmakers, astrolabe builders, at King's Landing. They drafted blueprints for a grand beacon atop the old Tower of the Hand. Mirrors of polished obsidian would magnify lantern flame, guiding ships night and fog. Some gossiped it doubled as a weapon, others that it symbolized a star's rebirth. Either way, project funds poured in. Reach grain lords eager for safe trade lanes. Trouble came not from sea first, but from the faith. The High Septon, once meek after seeing Dragonfire, fell ill and passed quietly. His successor, a fervent Riverlander named Tristifer, preached that miracles were mortal work, and dragons a distraction from pious toil. Sermons hinted that paying levy to a council rather than single sovereign risked disorder. In taverns, whispered rhymes grew. A council of wolves and flames sets 7 gods to shame. When sparrow bands vandalized a round keep grain convoy near Maidenpool, Jaime, traveling nearby, intercepted. He disarmed them with minimal bloodshed, ordered their ringleader to King's Landing for trial. Tyrion insisted on open court. Tristifer petitioned for ecclesiastical immunity. Daenerys compromised. The ringleader would repent publicly, then serve building roads. Some lords grumbled leniency. Others admired mercy. The faithful quieted, for a time. In river-run halls, young Edmur's heir, Ellen Tully, organized traveling theaters performing dramatizations of the long night, emphasizing cooperation of faith and magic. Attendance swelled. Coin supported orphanages. Tyrion quipped that plays often changed hearts faster than speeches. One crisp morning, a raven from Castle Black carried urgent script. A tremor of magic detected at the edge of the lands of Always Winter. Bran sensed flickers like embers reigniting. He wrote, "Not dead things. Dreaming ice." Theories flourished. Some believed the others' remnants stirred. Others guessed natural aurora storms. Jon did not dismiss. He ordered ranger patrols extended farther. Maps were drawn. He rode north often, leaving Daenerys to reassure southern lords. They joked she ruled 2 capitals, one of stone, one of snow, one of snow. On such a patrol, Jon and Ghost discovered a circle of crystalline growths half buried in scree. A ring of obsidian spires like teeth. Humming faintly under moonlight. Bran, summoned, dragged fingers across their smooth faces. "Seeds," he murmured. The heart of the Night King was not alone. When dead dust settles, life or death sets root. Jon contemplated fire, but Bran advised watchful study. They erected palisades, assigned keepers of lore to examine. At Dragonstone, little Rhaegar toddled after Lyanna, chasing puff of soot from the smallest hatchling, nicknamed Ember for the ember marks across its scales. Ember was gentle, wings no longer than a swallow's, but its roar still rattled crockery. Maester Cedric noted Rhaegar's pupils reflected flame like polished obsidian, while Lyanna's flashed silver in moonlit corridors. Sam wrote treatises on dragon inheritance, citing their eyes as proof of blended lines. Gilly teased him. He preferred charts to diapers. Daenerys found happiness in small routines, reading scrolls to her children on the terrace, dictating letters while stroking Ember's neck, planning orchard plantings along Blackwater with modest excitement. Yet she kept her old riding boots by the door, never forgetting flight. Nyra Sand's fleet first clashed with Euron off Tarth's mist-shrouded shoals. Dawn's howl surged bow first into Silence's flank, smashing boards. Nyra himself leapt onto Euron's deck, Arek in one hand. Euron met her with a crazed grin, wielding twin axes. Their fight raged across slippery timber, blood and seawater mingling. At critical moment, Gendry's catapult crew launched a barrel of wildfire that burst in green fury amid Euron's rigging, turning sails to burning curtains. Nyra dragged bleeding sailors into boats. Euron disappeared in smoke. Silence sank, taking its captain, so it was told. But later, tales claimed a black-haired kraken clung to Flotsam, laughing at fate. The sea war slowed. Volantene backers withdrew, fearing dragon reprisal. Tyrosh denied involvement. Yet masked priests still roamed east, whispering of deeper magics. Melisandre read their portents and asked an audience with Bran. That meeting, private atop the wall, lasted a day and a night. When she departed, her red robes looked faded, but her eyes clear. She headed west, beyond the Sunset Sea, seeking something no prophecy named. Years turned gently. Children grew. Rhaegar's first word, wing, thrilled both parents. Lyanna practiced archery under Angui the Archer, now captain of the Queen's bodyguards. Bran began training apprentices in Greensight. Mira, a Kaldurai scribe from Ashai, and a mute orphan boy rescued from Fleabottom. Tyrion's gray hairs multiplied. He prided himself the council argued more about harvest quotas than wars. But peaceful Eris pivot on small hinges. One summer's eve, while Jon attended harvest feasts in Winterfell and Daenerys oversaw city levy improvements, a masked assassin infiltrated the Dragonstone rookery. He carried a glass candle, sliver of obsidian used by warlocks to cross distances by thought. No sentinel saw him until flames burst. The rookery tower engulfed, scrolls incinerated, Maester's apprentices barricaded inside. The assassin aimed to seize newly hatched dragon eggs, Ember's siblings buried in heated sands. A stable boy saw the intruder, raised alarm. Angie sprinted into smoke. Ghost leapt from shadow, ripping mask away, revealing tattooed runes of the chain cult. Before Guardpike struck, the man swallowed poison, dying with smile. The fire spared only 2 eggs, one cracked in heat, fledgling never breathing. Daenerys grieved not for scrolls, but the world's attempt to snuff new flame. She penned letters to every free city. Help hunt chain cults or lose trade. Braavos answered first, offering faceless expertise. For a price, Tyrion paid in casks of Arbor gold. Jon returned, fury restrained. Together they tightened port patrols, expanded signal towers along coasts, posted Dothraki outriders around barrows and hatcheries. But Bran counseled caution. Fear seeds suspicion. Suspicions grow into horns of doom. Daenerys sighed. How then do we protect without fear? Plant trust deeper, Bran said. Share dragons. The idea shocked many. But that autumn, Daenerys and Jon convened lords at Harrenhal again. They proposed training program. Each region would provide 2 wards of honest heart. These youths would study under keepers of lore, learn dragon lore, possibly bond with hatchlings. The dragons would not be weapons of single crown, but guardians of a realm. Debate burned hotter than wildfire. Yet when Ember glided into the ruined hall, landing before 17-year-old Morin manderly and nuzzling his palm, doubt cracked. Boat passed by narrow margin. Training pits rose at Dragonstone, built of black basalt and bleached driftwood. Lyanna Alysanne and Rhaegar Eddard flew Ember and young Dreamwing under careful eyes. By 17, Lyanna could coax both dragons through barrel rolls above Blackwater. Rhaegar preferred low passes skimming waves. Other wards, Dorne's tiny Corgyle, the Vale's Elise Arryn, Baratheon's Edric Storm, practiced ground drills, awaiting eggs to hatch. In the north, farmers shook heads at tales of children on dragons, but they saw fields, safe from raids and roads patrolled by rangers. They judged results, not method. When heavy snows buried harvest one hard winter, dragons flew grain sacks from high garden to last hearth in days, saving thousands. One final trial rose. The faith again. High Septon Christopher's sermons escalated, condemning sky serpents as pride incarnate. He urged followers to reject any governance by dragon riders. Pilgrims gathered outside Sept of Baelor, carrying reeds and stones, chanting. Jaime and Brienne led city watch patrols to keep order. Dornish spearmen stood by in case. Tyrion drafted yet another compromise. Church tithes reduced, greater representation in Round Keep. But Christopher demanded dragons removed from the capital. Daenerys rode Drogon above the city walls. She did not roar flame. She hovered, casting enormous shadow across domes and spires. Then she descended to the Sept steps, alone. Pilgrims parted. She removed her riding cape, knelt before the doors. I will not enter with pride, but with humility. Speak with me inside, High Septon. Christopher appeared, wary. They spoke for hours within. When doors opened at dusk, both emerged together. Christopher addressed the crowd. The Mother's mercy falls on Queen and Sparrow alike. Dragons guard cradle of life, as mothers guard babes. We will give them space to fly, and they will give us fields to flourish. Bah. Tyrion asked later what changed his heart. Daenerys replied, I told him dragons are children of wind and fire, born without sin. He saw that truth. Some rumor she promised faith oversight on dragon breeding. Others whispered Bran's ravens perched within, watching. Years layered. Ghost grew grier around muzzle, but still roamed ramparts with silent pride. Bran aged little. His mind stretched in realms beyond time. Grey Worm retired from commander to teacher, instructing next generation of Dragonsguard in discipline, forged of pain but wielded for peace. Nyra Sand sailed west on expedition beyond mapped seas, chasing tales of Valyrian successor states. Gendry married a blacksmith's daughter from Storm's End, who'd out-hammered him in contest. Samwell became Archmaester of Histories, his chain forged from links of dragonglass and tin. Gilly oversaw First Orphan College at Old Town. Jon and Daenerys visited every corner of Realm yearly, often together, sometimes separate. They slept in shepherd huts when inns too ruined, shared meals with freedmen who wept, recalling chains. They listened more than spoke. And in their listening claims of injustice surfaced sooner. Tears dried faster. Rebellions never took root. One twilight on Hill of Rhaenys overlooking King's Landing, Jon watched Lyanna and Rhaegar dive their dragons under peach-rose sky. Laughter carried on wind like chimes. He felt Daenerys' hand find his. Lines etched around her eyes, marks of sun and constant smiles. He thought of all they lost. Brothers, friends, innocence, but also of what grew. Children, trust, a realm stitched loosely yet resilient, like hide stretched across a drum that thrummed with life. He remembered standing on a parapet years before, uncertain dawn ahead. Now dawn blazed each morning with mundane miracles. Ships docking safely, farmers trading in markets, ravens bringing news of births rather than wars. He understood then that victory over darkness was not a single act, but a promise renewed every sunrise. Daenerys spoke softly. The world breathes whole, at last. Jon nodded. And we keep its lungs clear. He pointed beyond walls where work crews erected a new tower, capped with the Grand Beacon's bronze mirror. As dusk deepened, the mirror caught final light, flinging it across bay in golden ribbon. Ships' bells answered like distant laughter. Far to the north, beyond silent plains, the obsidian spires Bran studied remained inert, singing only under aurora. He visited them in dreams, planting seeds of green life around. coaxing root and moss through cracks to hold the shards. Even broken night could nurture dawn, he believed. On Dragonstonda's terrace, old stone scorched by ancient forges, ember perched beside a third egg, recently laid by Dreamwing. Scaled surface, reflected stars. Maester Cedric predicted 2 more seasons before hatch. Lyanna sat cross-legged, writing a song about night turned ember. Rhaegar traced constellations, mapping flight paths. Midnight passed. Moon climbed. Around a continent bruised yet healing, wolves howled, and dragons answered. Not rivals, but harmonies. No horn of doom echoed. No wall trembled. Fires burned in hearths, not on battlefields. The long night lingered only in story and scar. Caution whispered from parent to child. And in that whisper, legacy lived. And so the kingdom endured, a braid of ice and fire, soothed by steady breaths of ordinary hearts, guarded by wings overhead and roots underfoot. A realm where dawn, once fragile, had grown fierce and unafraid. Oh, eh. The wind off Blackwater Bay was unseasonably cool for the height of summer, and in the hush before the dawn bells, Jon Snow stood on the freshly laid stone balcony of the Grand Beacon, gazing south into a horizon that glimmered with starlight. The mirror disk overhead, 20 feet across and polished to a glare, reflected faint constellations into the harbor like a second, wavering sky. Behind him, the capital breathed in its sleep. He could smell dockside nets still damp, hear the distant groan of ox axles on paving stones, feel the pulse of life beneath every shuttered window. It no longer felt like a city waiting to be consumed by fire. It felt like something cautiously, stubbornly alive. Soft footsteps. Daenerys approached in a linen shift, silver hair tied in a loose braid, Rhaegar's recent squall for milk still echoing faintly from the nursery tower. She slipped her arm around Jon's waist, pressing her cheek to his shoulder. "You're thinking too loud again," she murmured. "Counting," he said. "Ships in the roadstead. Lanterns in the windows. All the things a king fears might vanish if he blinks." Her hand traced the edge of his sword belt. "They'll still be here after dawn." She turned him gently to face the city. "Look." In the darkness, patches of lamplight formed constellations on rooftops and market squares. Merchants preparing for Riverland's caravans, bakers kneading for sunrise loaves, lamplighters finishing their rounds. And far beyond, across looping streets, the sept of Baelor glowed soft amber, each window a candle of resolve. No crowd brayed for dragons tonight. No faith militant patrolled with cudgels raised. They gardened by day according to new charter, and slept by night like honest workers. Jon exhaled. "I know peace is never finished, but some nights I wish it would last long enough for people to forget how fragile it is." Daenerys' lips brushed his ear. "We can't let them forget. They have to remember. Just enough to guard it." She paused. "Branson a raven. The obsidian growths in the far north have stopped humming. His ravens show moss creeping up their flanks, swallowing the runes. He believes whatever dream lay inside them has gone back to sleep." Jon closed his eyes. "Good." Then opened them again. "But something else always wakes." He felt her nod, felt her watching the same uneasy stars. Neither spoke for several heartbeats. Then quietly she said, "We need to talk about succession. We have a daughter who tames dragons and a son who tries to ride their tails." Jon replied, half smiling. "Isn't that succession enough?" "It must be clearer." She turned fully, keeping her voice gentle but firm. "The charter says the Round Keep elects the next first regent, even if they choose one of our children. But the world grows satisfied, and satisfied people grow careless. They may forget why they wrote those lines. We need living precedent." She laid a palm on his chest. "You should step down for a season. Test the council now before we're both too old to watch them stumble." He blinked. "Abdicate? To whom?" "Lyanna's only 13, Rhaegar 10, not yet." "Not abdicate. Delegate. A regency of months, not years. Let Sansa hold the throne while we watch. Quietly from Dragonstone. How the lords behave when they believe power is in mortal hands only. Jon considered. He pictured Sansa seated at the round keep dais, fingers steepled, ice-blue eyes reading sycophants' faces. Pictured Tyrion guiding from one side and Davos from the other, while Grey Worm's successor Captain Kennett held the city gates. He imagined Lyanna sneaking under balconies to listen, Rhaegar scribbling notes. And he imagined himself on windswept cliffs of Dragonstone, Rhaegal coiled around the stone drum, teaching the children how to read tides and nav charts, rather than court posture. His heart tightened, not with dread, but something like relief. "A season," he said at last. "When harvest wagons are fat, the lords will grumble, but not starve." Daenerys smiled, a slow brightening of her entire face. Then, after the harvest feast, a horn blew distantly, first call for harbor laborers. Dawn's rim burned crimson. Jon drew Daenerys into his arms, kissed her forehead. "Let's go inside before Rhaegar decides to announce a second sunrise." They turned toward the stairwell, just as a low thrum rippled through the beacon mirror. Both halted. The metal disc vibrated, scattering dawn's first gleam across the bay in wobbly shafts. Jon's hand dropped to Longclaw's hilt. "Earthquake." Daenerys shook her head. "Listen." A faint note, like a bow drawn across frozen glass, drifted on the air. Ghost, far below in the courtyard, lifted his head and howled once. Sharp, concerned. From a rookery turret across the keep, ravens erupted into wild flight. Within a minute, Tyrion arrived, hair askew, nightshirt tucked into mismatched breeches. Thought the damn mirror was about to leap from its frame. He wheezed. "What?" The note intensified, impossible to locate. A vibration in bone, not ear. It rose, tremored, then abruptly ceased. Silence returned, vast. Tyrion exhaled shakily, messenger birds shrieking. Stable horses bolting. Dragon earthquake seems plausible now. Jon glanced at the mirror's surface. No cracks. He turned to Daenerys, who touched 2 fingers to the stone rail, as if testing for memory of that hum. "Bran," she said. Within hours, Bran's raven arrived. Its scroll bore only 5 words. "The sea shakes the dreamer." No explanation. Tyrion snorted at the riddle. Daenerys summoned Missandei to copy the message tenfold, dispatching riders to every major holdfast. Jon paced the council chamber until Sansa's quick reply came by glass candle. No tremors felt at Winterfell, but a brief gust rattled every weirwood leaf in the Godswood at the exact dawn bell. She would investigate. By midday coastland, ravens confirmed strange phenomena. In Old Town, the starry Sept's prism window chimed once without wind. At Pike, barnacles detached en masse from iron gate pilings, floating belly up. In Dorne's mountains, a retired sellsword claimed his brass compass, spun thrice then stilled. Nothing harmful, everything uncanny. Archmaester Samuel Tarly arrived after 2 nights of hard sailing and hard riding, lugging leather tubes stuffed with inked star charts. He explained between gasps that Castamir's Deepwater Observatory had recorded simultaneous microtides, water drawing inland then rushing out, like the pulse of a sleeping leviathan. "Not enough to flood," he added, rolling open a parchment, "but everywhere." Same instant, he jabbed quill at a painted circle over the narrow sea. Epicenter triangulated roughly. "Here." Tyrion frowned. "That's open sea. Or undersea," Sam corrected. "Last winter, I studied records of Valyrian geodesists. They described an abyss, ridge of volcanic vents reaching north toward the shivering sea. They called it the Dragon's Vein, the doom-ruptured part of it. If something down there shifted, the pressure might—" An urgent knock. Grey Worm's successor, Captain Kennett, entered. "Signal tower from Driftmark reports a red whirlpool west of Bloodstone Island. No damage, but water glows at night." "Wildfire?" Tyrion asked. "Too deep and cold." Jon's fingertips drummed the council table. Masked priests once whispered of a sleeping storm beneath the water. could be mere fanatic's tale, but the memory of that bone-deep sound would not leave him. He ordered war council assembled by sundown. Davos, Jorah, Nyra Sand summoned back from Stepstone's patrol. Allery Rowan via Raven. Even Princess Arianne contacted by glass candle. Bran's presence, though distant, was demanded. Hours later, the map room flickered with lamplight. The great round table cluttered by seashells marking ship positions. Black stones for dragons. Bran's face appeared in a shallow basin of still water. An old trick he confessed he borrowed from children of the forest. His voice hummed through ripples. I dreamed of a woman of salt standing in a gate of pearl. She opened her mouth and song poured out. The sea answered. Then all was dark. Tyrion rubbed temples. So a mermaid lullaby. Delightful. How do we thwart it? No mermaid, Bran said. Something older. He hesitated. When the first men walked, there was a god of the deep places. Called Marash, the drowner, the one who waits. The Ironborn built only fragments of this myth into their drowned god. Marash sleeps under ridges, under volcanoes. I think someone tries to wake him. Bah! Sansa's voice crackled from a glass candle at table edge. The chain cult. Nyra Sand, newly arrived fatigued and salt-crusted, nodded. I captured 2 priests who leapt from a slaver carrack. They carried copper bells etched with deep-sea glyphs. Said they sought the black navel where chains are unmade. Jorah muttered. All chains, or some particular chain? Life itself, Grey Worm replied quietly. Sam cleared his throat. Ancient chronicles speak of tidal cataclysms when undersea vents rupture. If a fanatic sect triggered volcanic activity there, honestly, the scale is unimaginable. Jon moved a black stone representing Drogon to the narrow sea. If they wake a sea god, they drown the coasts. We hold most coasts, so they drown the realm and break our peace. Daenerys' gaze hardened. Then we smother god and cult alike before they draw first breath. She looked at Nyra. How soon can your fastest galleys reach the dragon's vein? 2 days with calm seas. 1 with a dragon's tailwind. Then no. Take Dreamwing and Windsinger. Jorah goes with you. Intercept any cult fleet, sink or seize. She pointed to Kennet. Prepare harbor scorpions and wildfire casks in case the sea boils under our walls. Tyrion coughed. Milady, if the vein ruptures, wildfire will do less than piss on a forge. Then we still piss, Lannister. She snapped, softer but unyielding. Sam added, I'll gather mage maesters to chart seismic pulses. Maybe we can predict new tremors. Jon laid a calming hand on Daenerys' shoulder. Bran, can you track whoever leads this? The water rippled. I see a mask of black iron with ruby tears. I see a horn made of hammered abalone, rimmed in living coral. It's carried by a priestess sailing under no banner. Her ship's bow is carved like a smiling eel. Tyrion grimaced. Creepy. Nyra's eyes narrowed. I have seen that prow near Gias. She calls herself Mother of Chains, no other name. Jon. Then find her. They adjourned. Dragons flew at dawn, Dreamwing with Nyra, Windsinger with Jorah. Rhaegal carried Sam and a pair of star mages equipped with glass spheres to measure water temperature. Drogon remained to guard the capital. Ghosts paced parapets, ears twitching at distant thunder that seemed to roll from the deep, rather than sky. 2 days later, a storm cloaked the stepstones. Lightning that spider-webbed horizon, but no thunder. Rhaegal's riders skirted towering anvils of cloud. Rhaegal disliked flying blind. On Windsinger's deck, Jorah felt hair rise. They sailed into the breath of something immense. Nyra steered Dreamwing in low passes, scouting. Beneath frothing swells, eerie crimson pulsed like ember veins. She dropped weighted lanterns. They descended only 50 feet before glow swallowed them. Water boiled, but steam smelled metallic, not briny. Suddenly their lookout cried. A silhouette emerged starboard. A carvel with eelbow, sails of shimmering nacre that rippled like fish skin. No crew visible, until a figure clad in banded coral rose at the prow. Mask of black iron dripping ruby tears. Nero wheeled Dreamwing, crossbows primed. Rhaegal roared overhead. But a sound rolled from the masked woman, a note that seemed to warp the wind itself. Sails flapped opposite direction. Ropes writhed in sailors' hands. Men clutched ears. Jorah felt ribs vibrate. Rhaegal faltered, screeching. Sam's mage dropped a sphere that shattered, spraying icy water across deck. In that instant, the sea between ships bulged, rising into a translucent mound that spun, hollow at center like a great throat clearing. Nyra swore, shouting to helmsman Kiran. Dreamwing banked hard. Jorah ordered grappling bolts loosed. They thudded along eel prow, but the woman only raised her abalone horn and blew again. The bulge imploded, water rocketing skyward in columns. One smashed Windzinger's mizzen clean off. Sailors tumbled. Rhaegal regained altitude, flames blasting spray into hot mist. Fire crashed upon abalone hull, but plating sweated steam and seemed unscathed. The priestess laughed, a sound like chimes underwater. Jorah gritted. Catapults with dragon glass. But launch crews reeled in ankle-deep water surging across deck. Lightning flared purple as it struck sea only yards away. Arcs danced up masts. Sam shouted over wind. "She's using resonance. Break her vibration. Counter frequency. Speak plain, Sam." Sound back. Louder, discordant. Anything. Nyra grabbed a deep throat signaling horn, shoved it into the arms of her bosun. Blow until lungs burst. She nodded to drummers. They pounded a wild beat. Sailors joined, pots, shields, voices. Dreamwing itself roared, wings thrumming air. The cacophony hammered the waves. For a heartbeat, the masked woman staggered, horn dropping to deck. The water mound quivered, collapsed. Rhaegal dove, talons extended. His claws tore the eel figurehead away in splinters. Shards of enchanted coral flew like shrapnel. Jorah's catapult launched a dragonglass bomb. It shattered on the masked woman's rail, shards spraying her robes. She recoiled as black glass lodged in coral plates. She hissed, a serpent's rage, then whirled, retreating below deck. Her ship pivoted, sails filling with impossible wind from opposite quarter. It fled into sheets of rain that seemed to part around it. Nyra pursued, but the water glowed red now, swirling heavier. Sam shouted readings. "Temperature rising. Vent opening beneath." Rhaegal screamed higher. Heat updraft buffeted wings. Jorah weighed risk. If that vent blasts, we lose both dragons. He signaled horns. Withdraw Dodawal. Nyra cursed but obeyed. Dreamwing climbed behind Rhaegal, their battered escorts limping. At safe distance, they watched the sea whirl into a spiral. From its center, a column of vapor mushroomed, lit from below by a brief red flash. Then nothing. The priestess's ship was gone. Back in King's Landing, Jon read the dispatch with jaw clenched. Daenerys paced the solar, ember perched on window lattice behind her, scales rattling with each twitch of Queen's shoulders. "She's not trying to drown the realm in one sweep," Daenerys said. "She's probing the deep, seeking a fissure big enough to call her god." Tyrion arrived with fresh intelligence. Tyroshi war galleys had vanished from ports night before the beacon resonance. And in Myr, a spy master wrote of chain cult conclaves forming tricolor sigils, red, black, and pearl. "They're uniting under a single doctrine now," Tyrion concluded. Euron was a pawn. The priestess is queen. "And now?" Jon called Bran through the tide pool again. Bran's eyes looked older. "She moves toward the cold keep," he murmured. "A fortress of basalt under the sea, once built by the Valyrians to tap vents for forging, abandoned after the doom. Its forges sleep, but if she wakes them, they'll birth quakes beyond counting." Sam produced maps. The cold keep sat where the dragon's vein yawned deepest. A blast there could send tidal walls at least 20 cubits tall across the narrow sea coasts, enough to inundate Sisterton, Gulltown. Perhaps even the lower docks of King's Landing if funneled by storms. We may evacuate high tides. Sam said. But the long-term fissure could shift climate. Permanent fog over Westeros. Crops fail. Jon's fist tightened. We fly. Before dawn 3 dragons rose. Drogon bearing Daenerys. Rhaegal with Jon and Ember, smaller but swift. Ridden by Lyanna at her insistence and her father's reluctant consent. With Tyene Corgyle as escort archer. Behind them sailed Nyra's fleet repaired. Jorah's Windsinger refitted. Stormchild leading. Sam's mage knots strapped glass sensors to seabird kites for aerial ocean readings. 6 hours into flight, clouds banked thick as stone. Lightning flickered within. Drogon roared, but Daenerys pressed knees. He pressed on. Ice pellets hissed along Rhaegal's flanks. Jon's breath whitened. Then, the clouds broke. They hovered above a maelstrom of scarlet foam spiraling around an island of black basalt, half submerged, ringed by curved towers like dragon claws. Atop central citadel, a dais of bone-colored coral, jutted, on which stood the masked priestess. Horn at lips. Men, not whites, but fanatic sailors, dotted parapets, chaining themselves to pillars. Fires burned green and blue where vents met air, casting insane shadows. The horn note tore through wind. Lower, deeper than before. The sea's spiral narrowed. Waves struck base rock, flinging spray hundreds of feet like silver spears. Drogon dove first. Fire blossomed, orange mixed with unnatural turquoise, where Vulcan gases ignited. Rhaegal followed, Jon clinging low. Lyanna swooped Ember along Lee's side. Arrows from Tyene's bow picking off chain acolytes mid-chant. Down below, Nyra's ballistas launched harpoons tethered by iron cable, anchoring to basalt and reeling ships close. Dothraki riders leapt across foam, axes flashing. Daenerys aimed Drogon's flame at the horn itself. But as fire struck, the priestess raised arms. Coral pillars glowed, siphoning flame into cracks. Stone ran liquid, channels feeding energy into the vent. The sea shook. A geyser erupted near Windsinger, tossing sailors. Jorah bellowed defense lines. Nyra steered Stormchild around, firing dragonglass charges that shattered chain idols. Jon saw coral runes pulsing, realized they channeled any power, even dragonfire, into the vein. He veered Rhaegal away from firing, shouted to Daenerys through wind. "Your flame feeds her." Daenerys pulled Drogon up, flame cut. But the damage done, the horn, superheated, shrieked, cracks webbing. The priestess laughed. Coral parted. From the fissures rose vapor shaped like serpents. Bran's voice echoed through Jon's mind. Sound counters sound? Jon remembered the cacophony that broke the first attack. He turned to Tyene on Ember. Signal horns. Lyanna nodded. She carried Northern Warhorn at saddle. Jon unslung his. Daenerys, hearing, gestured to Drogon's harness where a great Callan of old Valyria hung. They circled opposite directions, 3 dragons orbiting fortress. At Jon's hand signal they blew. Stark, discordant blasts. A wolf's call, a sand snake hiss, a dragon lord summons. The notes collided, clashed, ricocheted off towers. The coral runes flickered, pulsing irregular. Acolytes clutched ears. Bran's ravens swooped from cloud banks, thousands strong, screaming cacophony layered atop horns. The horn in priestess's hands faltered, note warbling. She tried again. Coral dimmed further, vent plume stuttering. Drogon seized moment. Daenerys directed a thin, precise flame at the horn mouth, not at Coral. The instrument shattered into molten shrapnel. Shockwaves staggered priestess. Mask flew aside, revealing gaunt face vined in crimson tattoos. Eyes crazed. Jon landed Rhaegal on citadel edge amid gale. He leapt, long claw drawn. The priestess drew a dagger of black pearl, slashed. Jon parried the blade singing like glass. They circled on stone slick with brine. She uttered words that made his head ring. Deep sea tongue promising drowning bliss. He answered by driving pommel into her jaw. Tyneen's arrow thudded into her thigh, but she fought on, strength not wholly mortal. Below, Jorah led Unsullied up storm-drenched stairs, cutting acolytes free of coral chains, tossing them down into foaming trenches where Nera's netters caught survivors. Each chain broken glowed briefly, then dulled, and with each link severed the maelstrom weakened. The priestess lunged. Jon slipped, nearly impaled. She hissed, "Marash stirs. Fret not, Wolf King. All shores will sing his name." Jon spat sea spray. Shorelines have learned new songs. He drove Longclaw through her chest. The blade, Valyrian steel etched with dragon glass, pierced tattoos. Fissures of red light spidered across her skin. She screamed, not in pain but fury, voice echoing deeper than human throat. Then her body collapsed into salt and dust, blown away by wind. Instantly the coral runes darkened. The sea groan softened, whirlpool unwound lazily. Vents still belched steam, but pressure eased. Towers cracked. The fortress itself creaked like a dying whale. Daenerys shouted for retreat. Jorah's men hauled survivors to rope ladders. Ships rode madly. Dragons lifted skyward just as the citadel crumbled, basalt plunging into swirling foam. A final geyser erupted, hurling chunks of coral that rained harmlessly onto empty decks. Minutes later, stillness reigned, only gentle swells heaving where primal chaos had boiled. Rhaegal circled low, scanning. No sign of Horn remnant remained. Nyra signaled all clear. That night, fleet anchored under calm stars. On Stormchild's quarterdeck, Jon rinsed Longclaw in a bucket of rum. Daenerys watched children asleep under deck awning. Ember curled about them. Jorah discussed casualty tallies with Grey Worm via Mage Mirror. Losses were mercifully low. Sans Mage recorded sea temperatures returning to normal. Tiny strummed a Dornish harp, low lament for drowned acolytes. Victims of faith twisted. Jon placed Longclaw beside him, looked across water to Daenerys. "You saved them." She shook her head. "We saved us." He considered, then said, "About delegation. After harvest seems too long. Realm just faced a god. Maybe it needs proof sooner that it can stand without us." Daenerys thought, gaze traveling from sleeping children to calm horizon. "Spring Council then." She agreed. When orchard blossoms fall, the announcement startled many, angered a few, inspired most. In the round keep, Jon and Daenerys set quills to parchment, naming Sansa first regent for 3 moons. Tyrion would remain hand, Davos, Castellan admiral, Bran, high keeper of lore. Lyanna and Rhaegar would accompany Jon and Daenerys to Dragonstone to oversee the nascent Dragon Academy. Symbolic withdrawal, not exile. Drogon, Rhaegal, and young Ember would fly daily patrols, but sleep on Blackwater cliffs rather than Red Keep. "The sky will still bear wings," Daenerys reassured. "But the throne room will bear only mortal feet." On the eve of departure, a festival filled King's Landing with lanterns shaped like dragons and wolves, each released on river current to drift seaward. Jon and Daenerys walked incognito among common folk, sharing honeyed chestnuts, laughing when a boy tried to sell them wooden dragons identical to those carved years earlier from Wildfire Ash. The boy boasted they brought luck. Jon bought 2, handing one to Daenerys with exaggerated gallantry. They slipped away before the boy recognized his king, but Daenerys looked back and saw him grinning. Coins clutched to chest. She whispered, "Kings who buy toy dragons from children. Perhaps we finally did break the wheel." At dawn they rowed down the river to Blackwater Bay, small barges escorting. Sansa, now regent, stood on dock, wearing cloak of stark gray lined in crimson thread, uniting colors again in her own way. She embraced Daenerys, then Jon. "Try not to fight any more sea gods," she teased. "We'll stick to wind kissing," Jon promised. As Rhaegal rose, city bells rang, not in alarm, but in salute. Drogon wheeled overhead, unleashing a burst of flame into the cloudless sky that dissipated into harmless sparklets. cheered by thousands below. The dragons banked southeast toward Dragonstone. Sunlight glittered off mirrored beacon, sending a shining path across the bay as if guiding their flight. For weeks, they lived quietly. Jon teaching Lyanna to plot using sextant, Daenerys recording Ember's growth for Sam's lexicons. Rhaegar exploring tide pools, while Ghost minded him like a nursemaid. Messages arrived daily, grain taxes balanced, faith quiet, Reach lords debating watermills versus windmills. Sansa wrote concise, calm updates. Tyrion's letters contained only minor crises, a dispute over fishing rights, a crater sinkhole near Casterly Rock repaired without incident. The realm not only endured, it thrived. On the last day of the third moon, Jon received final council missive. Round Keep unanimously invited Regent Sansa to extend her term until winter solstice, praising her judgment. She declined, citing charter. Jon smiled, reading. Daenerys kissed his cheek. "It works," she said. "The council knows they ruled themselves. We are guardians, not chains." Then Nandero. Jon stared at sunset over churning water, Ember's silhouette swooping playful arcs. He thought of nights on Castle Black ramparts, a bastard scanning dark woods, of a queen in exile seeing dragons hatch from funeral pyre, of walls of ice and seas of fire, of horns that tried to summon doom, and horns that shattered miracles. He turned to Daenerys. "We still stand." She took his hand. "So will they. So will our children after them." Then none. Far across the realm, a new generation grew. Orphans studying free at Old Town, fisher daughters riding wingless sky kites over Sisterton, ironborn lads learning orchards in former reaving yards, wildling clans carving runes of peace on old mammoth tusks. They carried in their stories echoes of one long night. But they spoke louder of the dawn that followed, and those who tended its fragile flame. Years later, bards would argue where peace truly began: at Winterfell's red wedding of ice and fire, at Eastwatch's last stand, at Harrenhal's council, or on the day two rulers stepped aside to prove trust. Scholars drafted timelines, poets dismissed them. The small folk simply remembered that for as long as the eldest among them could recall, the dragons crossed the sky not to conquer, but to guard. And the wolves below answered every roar with a song that promised morning. One crisp evening, long after harvests had passed and first flurries teased northern pines, Lyanna Alysanne, 16 now, stood on Dragonstone's highest ridge beside her brother and watched the aurora swirl green ribbons above waves. Ember roosted behind, wings folded. Rhaegar plucked a small carved flute from his cloak, a gift from Sam, and played a gentle melody, echo of the old wildling lullaby that once lulled newborns in frost huts. Lyanna listened, smiling. "Sounds like hope," she said. Rhaegar shrugged shyly. "Sounds like dawn." Below, in a warm chamber, Jon and Daenerys sat near hearth. Parchment cluttering table. Plans for a northern observatory. Letters from Nyra charting islands beyond the sunset. A knock. Missandei entered with dispatches. "All calm," she reported. 5th consecutive month, without notable dispute. Daenerys leaned back, folded parchment. "Then we have time," she said. Jon arched a brow. "For what?" She grinned, eyes glinting like molten steel. "To write histories, of course. Before Tyrion does it for us and makes us shorter and far more attractive." Jon laughed, drew her closer. Flames crackled. Outside, dragons' silhouettes crossed stars. Wolves howled their reply from far-off snows. And somewhere deep beneath reslumbering waves, the shards of a shattered horn lay entombed in cooling basalt, silent. Night stirred but never fully woke. Dawn returned again and again on steady wings. The realm endured. The song lived on. And peace, though forever unfinished, wore the shapes of wolves and dragons intertwined, woven into banners, etched upon towers, whispered in lullabies sung to children, who might one day ride storms their parents could only dream to tame.